What is up, everybody? Welcome to Stat Diggers. We're going to dive balls deep into the stats for the upcoming card. We have UFC Vegas 31. Really looking forward to this card. There's a lot of big favorites. I think they have the props out already as well. So we'll talk about some of those. They have like the violence props as well. We'll talk about them. Before we get started, if you guys can leave a like on the video, one small like does go a long way. We really appreciate that. You guys killed it on the likes last week. Let's do it again. Also subscribe here to Pub Sports Radio so not miss out on the other content throughout the week. Lots of content throughout the week as well. I will be going live also on Pub Sports Radio on Tuesday, talking about things from a DraftKings perspective. But as always, we're here with our Uncle Weezy. Uncle Weezy, looking forward to this card and kind of first thoughts on this card as well.
Yeah, man, I'm looking forward to it as well, dude. This is going to be a really exciting one. A lot of kind of lopsided fights that might be all action here. And I'm really looking forward to breaking this one down, man. You know, we don't take much time off, Brady and I. You know, just because the fights ended late last night, man, we're right back in here. It's Stat Diggers time. We're going to get into all 11 of these fights, go balls deep into the stats. I hope you guys are ready.
Yeah, you know, when most people are hungover, we're doing some tape study, man. We're doing some tape. We're getting into the stats, and yeah, looking forward to it. I mean, it should be a good card. Maybe not the most name value, but I do think there's some solid spots, especially from like some violence perspectives. We've been killing the violence bets as of late, so I think there's a lot of spots to stick out there. I'll hit up the chat real quick. What is up, Ryan? First one here in the chat. Makhachev up next. Yeah, he could be. Can't wait to break down that fight. Interesting main event. Two young guys that are very talented. Can't wait for it. On to the next one, baby. Islam will be on every parlay. Oh, I don't know about that. We'll talk about it. I'm here to learn something. Love what you'll do. Appreciate that, Tom. Thanks for hanging out. I'll be waiting to go see what Makhachev decision will be priced. Yeah, we'll talk about that for sure. Moises can actually crack. Makhachev has been KO'd. I personally be careful about throwing minus 700 into parlays. Give me that decision prop. Yeah, wouldn't personally parlay Makhachev this week, but I do think he wins, and we'll talk about why. Let's go save me from creating an OnlyFans account and let's make some money. Let's do it, Dan. Brady and Weezy have that bedroom cardio as far as Stat Diggers game goes. Yeah, I mean, we're working 24/7. It takes a lot of hard work to get everything done on a Sunday. How was your betting weekend? Pretty good. I went down minus 0.55 units. I was 4-3 on bets. I did a full recap on my channel, DFS by the numbers. If you want to go check that out. DraftKings, I got a takedown finally. Was the past couple of weeks was really close, but finally got a takedown there. So overall, pretty good night. Miesha Tate on every parlay. Oh my goodness, dude, don't do that. Okay, we'll talk about it. So let's get into the card. Looking forward to it, and bear with us here on the fight order because I'm assuming it's probably going to change throughout the week. But as of now, this is what we got. And we have Rogerio Nascimento going against Alan Badeau. Interesting fight to say the least. We have Nascimento, who is 28 years old, 6'2", 80-inch reach, going against Alan Badeau, who is 33 years old, 6'3", 79-inch reach. So Badeau is somebody that has fought at light heavyweight. In his last fight, he got knocked out by Tom Aspinall in his UFC debut. Really not a good look. Aspinall made it, look very, very easy. I think Badeau's, kind of undersized for heavyweight as well, going against Nascimento, who, he got knocked out by Chris Daukaus in his last fight. And, I thought that, he really should have went to the takedowns a lot earlier. Daukaus, of course, has a ton of power. But yeah, Nascimento's game is kind of getting this down to the mat. And if he does, the ground game is legit. And we'll kind of talk about more of that as well. Prior to that, he did submit Dontel Mays in his, I believe it was UFC debut. And I think he had a submission win on the Contender Series as well. So 4-1 in his last 5 fights is Nascimento, and 3-2 in his last 5 fights is Badeau. But you see that win there by disqualification against Top Stout. And yeah, if you go back and watch that fight, the dude gets choked out. He loses the fight. I don't know why it turned into a win by disqualification. Maybe, Todd popped for something. But if you go back and watch that fight, he legit gets taken down, dominated, and tapped out. So, Weezy, do you have any info about why that's a DQ win there? And let's get into the stats on this one. I know there's not much, though.
Yeah, I don't. That was one of the things before we came on the show. One of the fighters that I actually knew the least about was Badeau, because he's only got one fight in the UFC, and it ended very quickly, 1.58 minutes. So we didn't get to see a lot of them. So I went back and kind of looked at his, record and saw that his wins are over guys. Most of them had 0 wins. And I noticed that the Stout win was over one of the wins was over a guy with a winning record. And then it turns out that was a disqualification win where a fight he actually lost. So one of the things that I'm kind of perplexed about with Badeau is why is he even in the UFC? I know heavyweight's a little bit thin, but he's already 33 years old, only 10 pro fights. It just doesn't seem like he's got like a really well-rounded skill set. I know that Badeau's background is in Muay Thai and Judo, so that's an interesting combination of skill sets. And Nascimento, he is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, very, very good on top, gets a lot of wins by submission. But we don't have a lot of UFC stats on these guys, but what we do have is telling us a pretty interesting story and leading us towards a particular bet that probably has a really good chance of cashing. And let's look at it. Alan Badeau, eight professional wins, 7 of them by knockout, 1 of them by decision, okay? And then we've got Nascimento's got 8 wins, 6 of them by submission, 2 of them by knockout. So no wins by decision at all for Nascimento. And in Nascimento's 1 loss, he got knocked out. And in Badeau's 2 losses, he got knocked out. So in the 19 combined fights that these gentlemen have had at the heavyweight division, 18 of them have finished inside the distance. So that gives us that screaming fight doesn't go to decision. And I think one of the reasons that Brady and I have been nailing these violence bets lately is because this is such a great way to break down a fight. When you look at those finish stats for and against, you find out what somebody's strengths are, and you find out what his opponent's weaknesses are. Can you find a path to victory in those finish stats? Are you seeing people losing 100% of the time inside the distance? Well, these guys have 3 combined losses, and they've lost 100% of the time inside the distance. So that's what those stats are telling me. If we look at the striking stats, not much there. Badeau, we got a 1.5-minute sample size. He was out-volumed 2-1 by Aspinall. And he showed 36% striking defense. I mean, there's really nothing there. And then Nascimento, he's actually landing about the same amount of strikes as he's absorbing. His striking accuracy, 55%. His striking defense, 42%. Not very good. He got knocked down by Chris Daukaus, but so is everybody else that's fought Daukaus. So he's shown a little bit of chinniness, but, Nascimento is probably going to try to get the fight to the ground. Now, the grappling stats are what's important here because Nascimento is going to be looking to get this fight to the ground, and Alan Badeau is going to be much better on his feet. So we do see that Nascimento in his 3 fights has only attempted 2 takedowns, but he's gotten both of them. And the reason he's only gotten 2 takedowns is the 2 times he's gotten the takedown, he's submitted his opponent. So he's very efficient when he does get that takedown. And Alan Badeau, in 1.5 minutes, had 1 takedown attempted against him by Aspinall. Aspinall got it very, very easily and then finished him shortly thereafter. So, I'm shaping this one up as a striker versus grappler. Badeau the striker, Nascimento the grappler. I didn't see impressive takedown defense in the short amount of tape that I've seen on Badeau. If Nascimento gets on top of him, it's probably going to end quickly. If Nascimento is unsuccessful with the takedown attempts, it might end quickly as well. We don't have much in the way of strength of schedule. Both of these guys have fought good opponents. Nascimento fighting Mays and Daukaus, and Badeau fighting the undefeated Tom Aspinall. So they both had good opponents in the UFC. But if we look at prior to the UFC, let me go through some of Nascimento's wins here. Prior to the Contender Series fight, he's got a win over Everton Dos Anjos, 4-1. Fabio Cyborg, 1-4. Fabricio Nascimento, 0-0. Ricardo Giordano, 1-0. And Rafael Caixeta, 1-0. Now, that doesn't sound impressive, but when we match it up against Badeau's pre-UFC experience, it actually looks pretty impressive because here's the cans that Badeau has been fighting and beating. He got the win over Todd Stout, who's 9-4, but that was the disqualification win that Brady was talking about. He's got a win over Yuto Nakajima, 0-2. He's got a win over Yasuki Masuda, 6-11-3. He's got a win over Chul Yang Jung, 0-0. Dong Jing Wu, 4-3-1. And his most impressive win came back in 2015 when he beat the inimitable Shunsuke Inoue, who's 15-9 with 2 draws. Prior to that, Yuji Sakuragi, 15-22-2, and then another 0-0 fighter. His loss came to Dalcha Lungimbula in EFC in South Africa. So, neither one of these guys has fought great competition, but definitely if you're looking for somebody that's fought the tougher competition, it's Nascimento. Nascimento has better wins. Nascimento is probably going to have the much better ground game. If Badeau can keep it standing, he will definitely be dangerous, as we've seen Nascimento get knocked out before. But I'm leaning Nascimento here. His ground game is excellent, and if Alan Badeau hasn't fixed that takedown defense of his, this could be a very short night. But the easiest bet for me, and it could be a potential parlay piece because it's probably a wide line, is going to be the fight doesn't go to decision. What do you got for us on this one, Brady?
Yeah, I like it. I definitely agree with everything. So the fight doesn't go to decision actually opened up at -350. I'm assuming they're going to set the over-under at 1.5 rounds. Looking through the record of Nascimento, he's only been over that 1.5 round mark once in his career. And honestly, I think he finishes in the first round. I think he makes it look easy here. I do think he's a much, better fighter, the much well-rounded fighter as well. And he has a legit ground game for heavyweight standards, at least. His ground game is really good. He takes these guys down and they have no idea what to do. And that's kind of the thing with Badeau. I mean, he has no takedown defense. He's small for heavyweight. I think Nascimento is going to easily be able to take him down. And if he takes him down, I mean, the fight is going to be over shortly after. I mean, Nascimento, for as big as he is, the guy is slick on the mat. He's able to transition, good ground and pound and good chokes as well. He's a finisher, like you said. Neither guy has ever lost by decision. Neither guy has ever won by decision. That's kind of how we got the Giles and Duplessis bet last week, where Duplessis had never seen the scorecards. Both these guys have never seen the scorecards here. So I think Nascimento does make this look easy. And you take a look at the line, -345, honestly, probably for a good reason. I wouldn't recommend, parlaying that because we've seen him get knocked out before, got knocked out in his Dawkins fight. If you are betting on Nascimento, you want him to go out there and shoot a takedown within the first 10 seconds. You don't even want him to, mess around with the striking. Although, honestly, I think he's a better striker as well. It's just, I think that he needs to get this fight down to the mat for the easiest path to victory. I think he does eventually. And once he does get down to the mat, I do think he finishes him in that first round, whether it's a submission, whether it's a knockout, ground and pound, either one. And I guess a good fight to go back to watch, if you guys have not seen it, would be that fight Alan Badeau had with Todd Stout, where it was a DQ win, but the guy gets taken down multiple times in that fight. The guy gets his back taken. The guy gets flattened out. He gets choked out. It's just a terrible look, especially considering Nascimento is a legit grappler on the mat. So I like Nascimento. Not going to be parlaying it because you don't want to parlay heavyweights, especially a -350, especially a low-level heavyweight fight. But maybe take a look at Nascimento inside the distance. Maybe take a look at the under 1.5. People really like betting these over 1.5. So I don't know what it is. It seems like every fight that has an over 1.5, people always hammer it. So maybe you get a good line on the under 1.5 because I think there's a very, very good chance. I'd be shocked if Alan Badeau was able to survive on the mat with Nascimento on top of him. So again, big favorite. Fight doesn't go as -350. Maybe take a look at the 1.5. Any preference on the over/under? You're probably with me, leaning under, Weezy.
Yeah, definitely leaning under on this one. And Nascimento, you mentioned it. His striking is better than people think it is too. If you've watched him in his UFC performances, he does actually pretty well on the feet too. So yeah, I'm picking under. I think the fight doesn't go to decision, probably a fantastic parlay piece. And frankly, Nascimento could be a nice little parlay piece here because we got a lot of wide lines here. We got to figure out which of these wide lines are parlayable and which ones we just need to call 1-800-GAMBLER and stay away from. But let's move on to the next fight here, man. We're going to keep getting better here as we move on.
Heck yeah. So we'll get to the next fight here, and we have, my God, low level fight here. Francisco Figueiredo going against Malcolm Gordon. Francisco Figueiredo, the brother of Davison Figueiredo. He's definitely the bad Figueiredo here. He is 31 years old, 5'6", 69-inch reach. Going against Gordon, 31 years old, 5'7", 71-inch reach. And it's a tough fight for me because you take a look at Figueiredo, you try to get tape on him. There's nothing. There's maybe one fight out there that you can watch of Francisco Figueiredo. I mean, I tried my hardest to find tape on this guy. There's just not tape. And usually that's a huge red flag. That is a huge red flag to me. So don't know much about the guy other than he did beat Jerome Rivera. I think he was the first person or maybe the second person to beat Jerome Rivera by decision. Usually when people beat Jerome Rivera, they knock him out or submit him. We saw Zalga Sumagulov just do that. So that's kind of concerning. Malcolm Gordon, he has looked horrible in the UFC thus far. Got submitted by Amir Albazi, who I'm pretty high on. I think Albazi is definitely a good prospect to keep your eye out for. And then he got knocked out by Sumadarji, again, a really good prospect, someone to keep your eye out on. Which kind of surprised me, that submission loss, because Gordon is actually a black belt, supposedly a legit black belt, but seeing him get submitted by Albazi wasn't a good look. The guy has absolutely no chin. I'm sure we're going to talk about the finish stats and all that. You know, Figueiredo had a draw prior to coming into the UFC, I believe, and then got a win over Jerome Rivera in that decision, like I mentioned. So, interesting fight. Curious to kind of dig into this one.
Yeah, you know, there's some interesting stylistic things here. Figueiredo's a southpaw. You know, Gordon's a switch stance fighter. You know, if you look at the experience numbers, they're almost identical. Figueiredo's been fighting 3 years longer, which is crazy. You know, Figueiredo's had almost a 12-year career, and he's only 31. And, you know, 17 pro fights, and you can't find any of them anywhere. There's like 2 of them available anywhere. You know, outside of the UFC fight, there's like no tape on this guy. So, you know, this is one of those ones that I would be staying so far away from it if what I've seen already from Malcolm Gordon wasn't so horrible. There's a scene in The Simpsons where Monty Burns is getting arrested for something, and they take a flash photography picture of him for his mugshot, and he goes flying back against the wall because of the flash photography. And I thought to myself, if that was a UFC fighter, it would be Malcolm Gordon, you know, because like the way that he's gotten knocked out. I mean, the delayed reaction that he got knocked out of by Sue was just hilarious. He got hit square, and then like 2 seconds later just went running the other way and face planted. He's a killer be killed fighter, though, which is another thing that we could probably hang our hat on here, is the fact that Malcolm Gordon's got 12 career wins, 6 of them by submission, 4 of them by knockout. So he's finished 10 of his 12 wins, and in his 5 losses, he's been finished 100% of the time. 4 of them by knockout, 1 of them by sub. Malcolm Gordon, if there was the word chinny in the MMA dictionary, it would be Malcolm Gordon's picture would be next to it. He cannot take a punch. I don't think he should be fighting on this level. He is getting one of the lowest level flyweights that's out there. We look at Figueiredo, 12 pro wins, 58% by sub, 25% by knockout. I'd like to see a little more knockouts on his record if I think he's going to have a great clear path to victory against Gordon. That's, you know, Gordon's lost 4 of his 5 fights by knockout. So I'd like to see a little more power from Figueiredo. We haven't really seen that out of him. We've seen a little bit of wrestling, but he probably doesn't want to be on the ground with Gordon. Figueiredo, in his 3 losses, he's lost once by submission, once by knockout, and once by decision. So he's an equal opportunity loser, while we see Gordon getting knocked out much more than he gets subbed, but he gets finished 100% of the time. Not much in the way of stats here. We've got Malcolm Gordon's got 2 fights, but only 5 minutes of cage time. So we see some pretty pathetic stats here. Well, Figueiredo's only landing 1.93 strikes, and he's absorbing 2.07. We go over to Gordon, and you see a much more pathetic story at 0.55 significant strikes landed per minute, 13.64% striking accuracy. So I've said that guys couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat. I have to like go further than that for this one. I don't know what Malcolm Gordon can't hit, but it's pretty much anything. And he can get hit too. You want to talk about a punching bag? He's getting knocked down 2.76 times per 15 minutes. That's spectacular. He's getting knocked down on almost 5% of the significant strikes landed against him. So at that current ratio, as a statistician, we could say, if this guy has 26 strikes landed against him, he will more likely be knocked out than he won't be. So, yeah, man, there's not much here. We did see Francisco Figueiredo complete 4 out of the 6 takedown attempts in his only UFC fight, and Malcolm Gordon was taken down the only time somebody shot on him. It was Amir Albazi. Figueiredo has had 100% takedown defense thus far, and Malcolm Gordon hasn't even shot a takedown. I guess Gordon's losing to the better competition in Dergi and Albazi, while the only fight that Figueiredo has had is Jerome Rivera. Folks, the 1-800-GAMBLER is up there for a reason. I don't think we should be betting the money line on this. It's a little bit wide, but Gordon is not the kind of guy I would be putting an underdog bet on. Not from that chin that I've seen. I might have to just stay away from this one. The safest bet might be fight doesn't go to the decision, but even then, I'd like to see more power out of Francisco Figueiredo. This guy's been fighting a bunch of guys that I've never heard of, and he's still only got 3 knockout wins. So I'd like to see more knockout wins if I were to be really sure that he's going to beat Gordon. But man, I'm staying away from this one, dude. What do you got for us here?
Yeah, the 1-800-GAMBLER is up for a reason. I'd really caution people about putting the bad Figueiredo in parlays this week, because you just looking through the fight. First of all, there's not much to look at. There's like no tape on, little Figgy, but getting outlanded by Jerome Rivera, it's not a good look. He got outlanded 31-29 in that fight. He did take down Rivera 4 times in that fight, but on the mat, that's where Malcolm Gordon's quote, bread and butter is. I mean, he's a great grappler. Yes, he did get submitted by Albazi, but then again, Albazi's legit, so I don't know what to think of this fight, especially seeing the line. Taking a look at the line, we have bad Figgy, minus 310. Come back on Gordon is plus 260. There's no way I can lay that juice, because you mentioned there are some extreme concerns about the lack of power on the bad Figgy side. Only 25% of his wins by knockout, 58% by submission. Don't really see him submitting Malcolm Gordon. And yeah, Gordon is one of, if not the chinniest fighters you'll ever see, up there with like a Jason Witt. The guy is so chin, even on the regional scene. This guy's getting knocked out. A terrible chin. It just does Figgy have the power to put him out. I don't know. It's a weird fight. I wish there was more to see on tape. From the Figueiredo side. From what I see from Gordon is, yes, he's looked horrible in the UFC, but you go back and watch his fights on the regional scene. He's a solid grappler. He has a solid, well-rounded game. And there was, somewhat hype on this guy coming into the UFC. I thought he looked solid from the regional tape, but he came in here and shit the bed, man. He shit the bed, but again, he's shitting the bed against Amir Albazi, who's legit. Suma Darja, who's legit. Is little Figgy, is Francisco Figueiredo legit? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. So, especially at the minus 310, I would really caution people about laying him in parlays. I think he probably wins. But if he does, use that game plan of taking it down to the mat, that's going to give Malcolm Gordon a path to victory for sure. And even like the strike, and like I wasn't impressed with Francisco Figueiredo's strike in the Jerome Rivera fight. Like, again, if you can't knock out Jerome Rivera, can you knock out Malcolm Gordon? I don't know. Jerome Rivera is, very chinny himself. So I think an interesting aspect of this fight is going to be that fight doesn't go. So this fight is at 125 pounds. This fight is a flyweight fight. That's why I think, the bookies actually open up the fight doesn't go to decision at plus 115, plus money, which is kind of shocking, because you take a look at Malcolm Gordon, and Malcolm Gordon has been finished a million times. Malcolm Gordon has been finished all 5 times inside the distance, 4 by knockout, 1 by sub. And Francisco has been finished 2 times in 3 losses. So it combined 7 finished losses between the two. 7 out of 8 losses have been by finish. 83% finish rates for both. And we are getting the fight doesn't go to decision at plus money. I'll take that all day. I don't have access to that line, Weezy. I'm at plus 115, but I'm assuming if the fight doesn't go as plus 115, maybe like the under 2.5 would be like plus 130, plus 135. And I know why they're doing this. It's because it's a flyweight fight, right? Like flyweight fights, they typically go to decision. I know we just saw Rivera Zumagulov finish last night, but I think there's a very good chance that this fight finishes. And at plus money, I'm taking the violence all day on this one. Do you have any preference on the over or under?
Definitely the under. I mean, we've talked about it. One of the best reasons to bet an under is you combine the losses of both fighters. How do these guys lose fights? And, between these guys, we're talking 8 losses, 7 of them by finish. That's 87.5% of these fights. If we were to just make a bet based on the history of both of these guys' pro records, an 87.5% implied probability is going to be something in the neighborhood of minus 700. Think about that. That's what 87.5 implied probability would be. And now we're looking at an under 2.5 being plus money. Those are the kind of spots that you really want to jump on. But neither of these guys is very good. But we do know that when they lose, 87.5% of the time, and we've got an 8-fight sample size between the two of them where they have lost. They've lost inside the distance. That's a great indicator for an under bet. Since the money line is so juiced, if you're a degenerate gambler and you got to have action on every fight, I think Brady and your Uncle Weezy would be happy to sign off on an under bet here. I know I would.
Yeah, Thomas said it perfectly. I'll take no distance on every Gordon fight. Yeah, yeah, I agree. I definitely agree. I remember betting Sumadarji to win by knockout at like -120, probably the easiest bet I've ever cashed in my life. It was such a weird knockout where Madarji hit him and it was like a 5 second delayed reaction of Gordon. He just falls down to the mat. It was hilarious. But yeah, the guy's chinny. I think there will be a finish in this fight. We'll see what happens. If I get access to a plus money violence bet, I'll take that shot all day. All right, next we have a fight that I'm really looking forward to. We have Miles Johns going against Anderson Dos Santos. We have Miles Johns, who is 27 years old, 5'7", 66-inch reach, going against Dos Santos, who is 35 years old, 5'5", 70-inch reach. So Dos Santos is going to be at a 2-inch height disadvantage and a 4-inch reach advantage. And Miles Johns is going to be 8 years younger. We'll take a look at the last couple fights. Anderson Dos Santos is 3-2 in his last 5 fights. He beat Martin Day by submission in a fight that was very weird. Martin Day did the one thing he should not have done and went for a takedown in that fight. Martin Day was somebody that went 0-4 or 0-5 in the UFC, who is now cut. He lost to Andre Ewell by decision, lost to Nad Narmani by decision. I believe that was his UFC debut, if I'm not mistaken. So 3-2 in his last 5 fights is Dos Santos. Miles Johns beat Adrian Yanez, who people are very, very high on. Richard Santiago, Cole Smith, split decision there. He got knocked out by Mario Batista. I think it was like a flying knee or something in that 3rd round that got him out of there. And then looked really good in his last fight against Kevin Natividad in a fight where, his striking looked a lot better. He looked much improved. His jab looked really good. He's training at a very good camp in Fortis MMA. He's young, arguably in his prime or close to getting there. So kind of a fight where you have somebody, on your way up in Miles Johns and somebody, really on your way out in Dos Santos, somebody that's 35 years old, at 135 pounds, not really a good look. So yeah, really curious to see the stats on this one because we actually have some decent sample sizes here.
Yeah, not bad. For this card, this is a decent sample size. We got 7 UFC fights between the 2 of these guys, so we got some meat on the bone here. But you mentioned one of the very first things that you mentioned is very important here. This is a bantamweight fight, and Anderson Dos Santos is 35. That's kind of like the cutoff point as a bantamweight where you start to look over the hill. And you got a guy in Johns who's 3-1 thus far in the UFC, only 27 years old. So we're talking about an 8-year, youth advantage here. But Johns will be at a 4-inch reach disadvantage. So that is also something to look at. And we see Anderson Dos Santos, 35 years old. So he's got 29 pro fights, a lot more experience than Johns, who only has 12. Dos Santos 21-8, Johns 11-1. About 70 more minutes of cage time for Dos Santos, over 200 minutes of professional cage time. We see that Dos Santos' fights are a lot more likely to end inside the distance at a 7.07 average fight time, while for Johns it's at 11. And while Dos Santos has been fighting since he was about 25, Miles Johns has been a pro since he was about 20. So Miles Johns, if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me on this if I'm wrong, but I know that he had a high-level high school, I believe, wrestling pedigree. He might have even been a state champion. So
State champ. Yep. State champ.
Okay, good. And so at least I'm remembering that right, because that's always just such a great skill set to have in your back pocket as a mixed martial artist. Whatever it is, whether it's you're fighting a jiu-jitsu guy who wants to get the fight on the ground and you got great wrestling, you can keep the fight standing. And if you're fighting somebody that's better than you in striking, you got a chance to maybe use that offensive wrestling to get your opponent where he's a lot less comfortable. So we know that Johns has that skill set, and that 3-1 record is an indication of how well he's used that skill set. If we look at the finish numbers for these guys, Miles Johns, less than a 50% finish rate. 45% overall in his 11 wins. So that is 5 out of his 11 wins have been finished inside the distance. 3 of them by knockout, 2 of them by sub. So more decisions than finishes for Miles Johns on the offensive side. While for Anderson Dos Santos, we got a 57% sub rate, 24% by knockout. So we got over 80% finish rate here. And that's fantastic for Dos Santos. He has finished fights, and we see at the 7.07 average fight time for Dos Santos that he is more likely to get it done inside the distance. Miles Johns' only loss has come by knockout, and for Dos Santos, we got 8 total losses. On his record, 2 of them by submission, 3 of them by knockout. So 5 out of Dos Santos's 8 losses, inside the distance finishes, 100% of Johns's. So we're looking at 6 out of 9. So about 2/3 of these guys' losses have finished inside the distance. So that's an interesting little piece of information there. Let's get to the striking statistics. We see that Miles Johns has been doing a lot better than Dos Santos at 3.33 significant strikes out of 6.9 for 48% striking accuracy, while for Dos Santos, it's only 2.66 out of 9.31. So only 28.5% striking accuracy for Dos Santos. That's very inaccurate. But he's also getting outstruck on the feet quite a bit, as Dos Santos is only landing 2.66, but absorbing 4.8. So he has not fared well on the feet. Dos Santos has never knocked anyone down, and he's never been knocked down. While for Johns, he's landing 3.33 per minute and only absorbing 2.42. So it's a very great significant strike difference, an excellent significant strike ratio for Johns. His striking statistics are much better, much more efficient than Dos Santos. And the most impressive number here is the 68.25% striking defense that Johns is showing. That's fantastic, man. Almost 70% striking defense means that he's very hard to hit. And for a guy like Dos Santos, who's throwing a ton of volume, 9.31 significant strikes per minute, comparison to just under 7 for Johns, but he's so inaccurate that you got to give Johns a pretty big-time striking advantage here. In addition to that, Johns showing some power. For a bantamweight, landing a knockdown on over 1.2% of your significant strikes landed is excellent. 0.61 knockdowns per 15 minutes. He's also getting knocked down, is Johns, as he's been knocked down on 0.83% of the significant strikes landed against him for 0.3 knockdowns per 15 minutes allowed. So Johns is more powerful than Dos Santos, but he's also more likely to get knocked down than Dos Santos. Now, let's look at these numbers here, because it would appear that Dos Santos is going to be more comfortable on the ground, as those striking statistics are not very impressive for Dos Santos. So let's look at the takedown offense. We've got 3 out of 16 takedown attempts have been successful for Dos Santos. That's 18.75% takedown percentage. That's not good. But what is good, and what's very important here, is that he's averaging 5.33 takedown attempts per fight. So that's good. When somebody's a good grappler, we want to see that they're willing to go to the wrestling over and over again, because we can tell by those striking stats, if this stays on the feet, it's going to be kind of shocking if Dos Santos wins. Those kind of striking numbers, you don't accumulate that over a 3-fight sample size by accident. He's almost getting, landed on twice as much as he's landing on his opponents. So he's going to have to get takedowns if he wants to be successful here. So at least he's attempting the takedowns, and he's gotten 3 of them. But if we look at Miles Johns here, man, we're looking at an 87.5% takedown defense. He has successfully defended 7 out of the 8 takedown attempts against him, and his opponents are averaging 2 takedown attempts per fight against him. So Johns is getting 12% control time, allowing 17% control time, while Dos Santos has done a little bit better there, while getting 20% control time, while only allowing 14%. So, I like this, as I look at the numbers here, I like the numbers for Johns quite a bit. If we go into the strength of schedule, we'll see that neither one of these guys has been fighting top-level competition at all. The average record of a Miles Johns opponent is 0.5 wins and 1 loss for a 0.5 ratio, while the average record of a Anderson Dos Santos opponent is 1.33 wins and 3 losses for a 0.44 ratio. So, Dos Santos's only win in the UFC comes against a guy who was winless in the UFC at 0-5, while Miles Johns has 3 wins, but the average record of the guy that he's beating is 0.33 wins and 0.67 losses. So neither one of these guys has fought or beaten high-level UFC competition here. I love the striking stats for Johns. I also like that, that 87% takedown defense against the guy who's only getting takedowns at an 18.75% rate. when I look at these numbers, there's a couple of paths to victory that are really sticking out here for Johns. While the path for victory for Dos Santos would be to use his grappling, the numbers are telling me he's not going to have a lot of success doing that. So just looking at these numbers pre-tape, I'm pretty heavily leaning Miles Johns here. How are you feeling about this one?
Yep, before I get into it, I do want to shout out a dono here. Don't ask, don't tell. Appreciate the $10 dono. He says, it ain't easy being Weezy. It's not. It's probably not. I don't know.
Actually, it's pretty damn easy. I love my life. Things are great. I get to talk to you guys about mixed martial arts on a Sunday night, man. It is easy being Weezy, but we work hard for this show. Don't ask, don't tell. You're the man. Thanks for the dono, bro.
Appreciate it as always. Don't ask, don't tell. Thanks for hanging out on a Sunday. But yeah, I think there's a bunch of points to bring up. I think the age is huge. Bantamweight fight, 35 years old, Dos Santos, and he's turning 36 pretty soon here. What, July 24th, he turns 36. So yeah, he's almost 36. So that's a huge red flag. I think Miles Johns, the younger fighter, the striking stats are a huge red flag, especially if you think that Miles Johns is going to be able to stuff the takedowns, which I kind of do. We talked about the 87% takedown defense, him defending, I think 7 out of 8 you said, which is very good. State champion wrestler. I believe he wrestled in college as well a little bit. So take a look at, some of the striking stats that really stuck out to me was going to be Dos Santos lands 2.66, absorbs 4.8 for a negative 2.14 significant strike differential. That's horrible. 55% strike and defense, whereas Johns, a positive 0.91 significant strike differential and a 68% strike and defense. And again, Miles Johns training at a very good camp, Fortis MMA. Fortis has been looking good as of late. We're going to see massive jumps and improvements every single fight for Johns, a guy as young as he is at a great camp. And we did see him in the Natividad fight where Johns looked the best he ever had. His striking looked really good. He controlled range really well. He used his jab. He looked fantastic. So I like Johns here quite a bit. I'm not sure, to be honest, why the line is this close. Maybe because Dos Santos, he is going to be the more dangerous fighter in this fight, but you got to think, if he's going to win this fight, he's got to either knock out Johns, which could happen. Johns has been knocked out before, or he needs to take down Johns, which I think is going to be very hard to do, and submit Johns, which Johns has never been submitted, but he has been knocked out. So I think Dos Santos to win, he's going to need a finish, whereas I think Miles Johns can win maybe by knockout. Dos Santos has been knocked out 3 times, but more likely a decision in my opinion. So take a look at the odds here. We do have Miles Johns as a minus 170 favorite. And we'll take a look at the fight doesn't go decision, which is plus 150, and fight goes decision minus 190. Me personally, I'm leaning towards a Miles Johns decision. But you never know. Anderson Dos Santos has been finished. He's been finished 5 or 6 times in his career. Get the exact number here. He's been finished 5 times in his career, 5 times out of 8 losses. Miles Johns been finished in his only loss. I like Miles Johns here. I like Miles Johns probably straight. Any preference on the over-unders, Weezy?
Yeah, this is a hard one to call for over-unders. I mean, we do see that Dos Santos' fights were way more likely to finish than Johns'. The thing, even though Dos Santos has been finished in 5 out of 8 losses, it's not enough for me to look at it. I like those 3 knockout losses because I think John's best path is probably by a knockout. Man, he's got nice hands for a wrestler. But, the thing is that John's finish rate is less than 50% as a pro. And in the UFC, it's funny because he's actually knocked out he knocked out Natividad, and then he got a decision against Smith, but he also was knocked out by Bautista. So, his last 2 fights finished inside the distance. And prior to that, there was only 3 of his previous 10 fights that had finished inside the distance. So I would probably say that I would lean the over in this one, but I'm definitely not betting the under. That's kind of how I feel about this one.
Yeah, I don't really like the totals. I think there's a lot better spots on the card for totals. Like the first 2 fights we talked about, I think there's great spots there. This one, kind of lean Johns. I think it could be either a decision or KO there, but Johns for me. Okay, next fight we have Khalid Taha going against Sergey Morozov. I didn't tape this fight all that much. I did some tape on Sergey here. Well, I was able to watch 2 or 3 fights. Taha, though, he's 29 years old, 5'5", 69-inch reach. Sergey Morozov is 32 years old, 5'6", 67-inch reach. We'll take a look at the last couple fights here. So Taha did lose to Jaime Barcelos by decision. Barcelos looked really good in that fight. He did submit Bruno Silva. I think it was like a third round submission, and that got overturned due to, I don't know, maybe performance enhancing drugs, maybe marijuana. I'm not sure exactly why, but it did get overturned to a no contest. And he did knock out Boston Salmon prior to that loss to Nad Narimani. So he is 2-2-1, no contest in his last 5 fights is Taha. Sergey Morozov is 4-1 in his last 5 fights. His UFC debut came in here against Umar Nurmagomedov. Obviously not an easy fight at all to come into. He was a very big dog in that fight, and for a very good reason. Nurmagomedov went out there and submitted him fairly quickly there and fairly easy. So, yeah, curious to get into the stats on this one. I know we don't have much of a sample on the Morozov side, but did anything stick out to you?
Yeah, not much sticking out here, and I need to do more tape on Morozov because even though he's only been in the UFC for 1 fight, the guy's got 21 professional fights, a 16-5 record. He's been a professional mixed martial artist for 13 years, which means he probably started at the age of 18 or 19, fighting out of Kazakhstan. You know, a lot of great fighters coming out of there right now. You know, we got guys like Ismagulov coming out of Kazakhstan, Rakhmonov. You know, we've seen a few of these Kazakh fighters. Even somebody like Maria Agapova, you know, is Kazakhstan from as well. So we got a lot of fighters coming out of this region of the world right now, out of the Central Asia region. And, you know, and Taha, he does definitely have a lot more experience in terms of at the higher level. He's a power guy. 4 UFC fights. We got 1 win, 2 losses, 1 no contest. And that no contest was for performance enhancing drugs against Bruno Silva, who's actually, you know, a flyweight who came up to bantamweight to fight him. So if we look at the finished stats here, we see that Morozov has finished 19% of his pro wins by sub, 50% of his pro wins by knockout. For Taha, we got 69% of his wins by knockout, 15% by sub. So both these guys are knocking out their opponents much more than they are subbing their opponents. If we look at how they get finished, Sergey Morozov has been finished in 4 out of his 5 professional losses, 3 by sub, 1 by knockout, while for Taha, he has 3 professional losses. 1 of them has been by submission, 2 of them have been by decision. Taha, in the striking, has shown a lot of power. The dude's built like a tank for a 135er. He's short, but he's got serious power. He throws hooks. He's one of these guys who basically throws everything into every strike. So we see that we've got a couple guys here that aren't showing what anybody would call spectacular striking accuracy here at 35.23% for Taha, 23.33% for Morozov. You know, and Morozov's got a 1 fight sample size. It was against the Nurmagomedov that might be a future champion in Umar. So he's only landed 0.81 strikes and he's absorbed 2.89. But Taha, you know, we've got a much bigger sample size here with Taha with 4 fights. And we see that he's getting outlanded too. He lands 2.86, but he absorbs 4.26. But here's the thing about that. Khalid Taha, you could see these guys who are getting outlanded by quite a bit still win fights as long as they're showing power when they do land. And look at Taha. For a bantamweight to have a 1.6 knockdown per significant strikes landed percentage is serious power for this division. And so we know that Taha is going to have the power advantage in this fight. Striking defense, 43% for Taha. But like we said, he is absorbing a lot more than he lands, but he lands with so much power that sometimes he can get away with that. If we look at the grappling numbers, what's most interesting here is that Taha has had 4 UFC fights, and he has only had 2 takedown attempts and never gotten any. So we can pretty safely say here that if Morozov wants to keep this fight standing, it'll stay standing. If Morozov wants to get the fight on the ground, it'll probably get on the ground because we look at Taha here, a 61% takedown defense. That's not good enough. He has only successfully defended 16 out of 26 takedown attempts. So he is getting takedown an average of 3.45 times per 15 minutes, while Morozov, he got taken down 5 times in 1 round, or I'm sorry, in 2 rounds. So he's actually getting 8.67 takedown attempts or successful takedowns against him per 15 minutes. So both of these guys have been taken down a lot, much smaller sample size from Morozov. But, Taha, he's faced 6.5 takedown attempts per fight, and he's getting taken down 2.5 times out of those 6.5 attempts. So it looks like if Morozov wants to wrestle offensively, he could have some success against Taha. And the same thing for Taha against Morozov, but because we've only seen 2 takedown attempts for Taha, and we haven't seen him successfully get any, it would be safe to say that, Morozov is probably, just by looking at the numbers, the more likely the guy to be successful grappling here. We don't really have any ratios for Morozov because his only loss in the UFC came to an undefeated guy, so we can't compute a ratio when the denominator is 0. Taha's got a 1.33 ratio. The average Khalid Taha opponent is very inexperienced at 2 wins and 1.5 losses. The average guy that Taha beats is 1-1, and the average guy that Taha loses to is 2.5 and 1.5. So, we're not seeing really spectacular numbers here out of Taha. He gets hit a lot more than he hits his opponents. The only thing that we're really seeing here is that power that Taha brings. But, he's got poor takedown defense. He's got very poor offensive wrestling. This is, boy, when I just saw Taha Morozov, I was thinking, oh, Taha probably knocks this guy out. But, I need to find out more about Morozov. I need to know how much he goes to his offensive wrestling, because if that's something we see in the tape pre-UFC for Morozov, this could be a pretty good spot to make some money here, because Khalid Taha's takedown defense is not excellent, and he is facing a lot of takedown attempts. I think people have just shown that they're much more comfortable being able to put this dude on his back. And the last thing that I want to mention here is 10% control time for Khalid Taha, 42.65% control time against. So if you want to beat Khalid Taha, it shows you right there in the numbers. Take him down, lay on him, don't let him back up, and don't let him hit you with that power when he's got canvas underneath his feet. I think the value is on Morozov, but I need to look more into the tape to find out how much this dude wrestles. What have you seen about that? I mean, which way are you leaning on this one?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't love the Taha is -170. I don't love that. Morozov is +145. I got to tape this fight a lot more, but from what I've seen, Morozov does go to his wrestling sometimes. It's like some fights he goes to it, some fights he does not. His striking, doesn't look too bad as well. Dan brought it up here. Maybe we have a dog spot. We gotta, definitely look into it a little bit more. But yeah, he brought up a lot of great points of the takedown defense. So maybe Morozov does mix in the takedowns here or there. The Taha power is something that's very concerning as well. We'll take a look at what does the fight doesn't go. Fight doesn't go to decision is +145, which is interesting, I guess. Taha has been finished in one of his losses by submission, and Morozov has been submitted twice in a knockout loss as well. So Taha 85% finish rate. That's really good. Morozov 69% finish rate. Definitely got to look into this one more. But yeah, if Morozov can go out here and get takedowns, it could be a very, very competitive fight. So yeah, -170 for Taz. It seems a little bit wide to me, but again, I just got to tape the side, the Taha side a lot more. But yeah, could be an interesting dog spot potentially. But, first look, I do think the line is somewhat off. Do you have any lean on the over-under in this fight? I know it's not much to go off to here, really.
Yeah, this is one of those ones where I would just say I'm not the total doesn't really interest me because, both of these guys are pretty solid finishers, but neither one of these guys, like Taha's only been finished in 1 out of his 3. Morozov has been finished in 4 out of his 5 losses, but 3 of those have been by submission. So, Taha's not really submitting anybody. He's only got, I think, maybe 2 wins by submission in his whole career, and they probably came a long time ago. It wasn't anything. Oh, yeah, one of them was against Hamza Kuheji. I don't know who the hell that is, but that was fairly recently. So, I guess he can get some submissions, but, is he gonna get on top of Morozov? Well, he's got 0 takedowns, and he's only got 10% control time in the UFC, so probably not. So, yeah, The total really doesn't interest me. What's kind of interesting me is that dog money on Morozov. I got to find out if this guy's going to wrestle. And if he does, this could be close to a 50-50 fight, depending on how often he's able to get Taha on the ground and hold him there, because Taha's just not dangerous enough on his back. So, yeah, that's where I'm leaning here.
Yeah, I like it. I like it for sure. We do have about 100 in here. If you guys can all hit the like, that'd be much, much appreciated. You guys killed it on the likes last week. Let's get those likes up. Maybe get to 100 by the time we get out of here. I think we were like really close last week. I think we were like at like 98 last week by the time we got out of here. So maybe get 100 likes. That'd be sweet. Me and Uncle Weezy and Pub Sports Radio really do appreciate all the support week in and week out, every Sunday, 7:15 p.m. Eastern time. Love digging balls deep into the stats with my Uncle Weezy. So we'll get to the next fight. Amanda Lemos going against Montserrat Ruiz. Lemos, who is 34 years old, 5'4", 65-inch reach, going against Ruiz, who is 28 years old, 5 foot and a 61-inch reach. One of the less reaches you'll ever see, 61 inches there. And then you have the last couple fights between the two. So Lemos looked really good in her last fight against Liviane Souza. She dropped her like twice in that fight, knocked her out. She did win a decision over Inoue. She submitted Miranda Granger. Prior to that, she lost to Leslie Smith. I believe it was like a second-round knockout where Lemos slowed down a ton in that fight. She kind of gassed out, but we saw in like the next 3 fights where she really has been focusing on that cardio, and her gas tanks look a lot better, so that's good. But yeah, not a good look in that Leslie Smith fight, but again, I do think she has fixed those cardio issues as of now. Montserrat Ruiz, she came in to her UFC debut against Cheyenne Bays. That was the card where both Bays were pretty big favorites, and both of them lost. And it was one of those weird fights where Ruiz just kept taking down Bays, not doing much with the takedown, but ended up winning a decision over Bays. And I don't know, it's a interesting fight here. The odds are very wide. I'm sure we're going to see why once we talk about it here. But yeah, I'm really high on Lemos. I think she's really good. I think she's well-rounded, and I think she's the better fighter in this fight. But, both fighters are 4-1 in the last 5 fights. I think it's going to be a good one. And, can't wait to hear your take on this, Weezy, because I'm really liking Amanda Lemos here.
I am too. Dude, if you haven't seen Lemos fight, you go back and watch that Liviane Souza performance. My God, was it vicious. And, this is a 115-pound women's fight. One thing that we just don't see in this division is power, literally out of anybody. Knockouts. When I sort my UFC database by weight class, if you look at like the 30-some-odd women's strawweight fighters that I have in there, you'll find maybe 4 of them who have a knockdown percentage over 0.3%. People aren't knocking people down in this division. Amanda Lemos has a 1.6% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed. That is crazy power. That's literally off the charts. There's nobody showing that kind of power in this division. She has vicious hands. And then we look at the finish stats. 9 pro wins for Amanda Lemos, 8 of them inside the distance. And that's great. You see that 89%, and you're like, man, that's really good. But then you look at what finish rates you're seeing out of the strawweight division for females. And, most of these fighters don't even have a 50% finish rate. So there are some statistics that absolutely jump off the page when you look at Amanda Lemos's numbers. And then when you watch her fight, you see why those statistics jump off the page. She's minus 500 for a very good reason here. Ruiz, on the other hand, is somebody who Cheyenne Bays was calling a one-trick pony. Ruiz uses what's known in judo as a head wheel. It's basically you get a headlock, you step in front, you trip them down to the ground, and then you hold them there. And that's a really effective throw in judo, because in judo you can win with a pin. Now you can't win with a pin in MMA, and oftentimes when you try that head wheel and you got your opponent on the ground, it becomes very easy for them to take your back, because it's hard to hold that position, especially when your opponent isn't wearing a gi. So we saw Ruiz have quite a bit of success with that head wheel, and she threw up a bunch of control time there against Bays and got a great win. But the problem is that she's 4 inches shorter than Amanda Lemos. She's got a 4-inch reach disadvantage, and they're both southpaws. So she's probably more, used to fighting orthodox fighters. Ruiz is going to have to close the distance in order to get those throws that she's most comfortable getting. And Lemos is going to pound her on the way in. And I'm telling you, her striking accuracy at 64.16%. She's landing 6.21 significant strikes per minute out of 9.69. I mean, that's almost 2/3 accuracy. And she's landing a knockdown on 1.6% of her significant strikes landed, averaging 1.49 knockdowns per 15 minutes. That's like twice as many knockdowns per 15 minutes as like Derek Lewis gets. I'm not even joking about that. That's crazy. So, this is going to be this is such a hard ask for Ruiz. She's never fought anybody like Lemos. And even Lemos, 4 for 4 on her takedown attempts. She's 100% on her takedown attempts. She averages 2 per 15 minutes, while Ruiz is actually averaging 4. We see that Ruiz has 66% control time while only yielding 7% control time. It's in one fight, though. So, that's something that, it's a small sample size, but still very impressive for a one-fight sample size to dominate your opponent that way. That basically means she got about 10 minutes of control time out of 15. And, Lemos, her opponents in 4 fights have only attempted 1 takedown against her, and they were unsuccessful there. So, Lemos has fought the better competition. And then the last thing that we need to talk about, which a lot of people don't know here, but, that Leslie Smith fight, Amanda Lemos is a strawweight. That fight took place at 135. So, they don't let people weigh in at 135 in strawweight. So she's not going to be fighting anybody that's going to be knocking her out. Anybody who thinks Amanda Lemos is chinny, well, she was chinny at 135, but at 115, nah, she's not. And the fact that she gassed out there, it could have been an adrenaline dump. It was her UFC debut, and she was up 2 weight classes. So, I like Lemos. I like Lemos inside the distance. I mean, those power numbers, you have to look at them through the lens that this woman is a strawweight. Okay. Crazy striking numbers, crazy volume, fantastic takedown defense, a great offensive wrestling game. But it's just the power, Brady. That's what really jumps off the page here, man. I'm going to be looking to bet Lemos by KO inside the distance here. I'll probably put at least a unit on it. This is a bad matchup for Conejo.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to be a good old-fashioned ass beating here, and she's a big favorite for a really good reason. And it's probably not smart to lay minus 500 and maybe put Lemos in a parlay. But man, this is a fight she really should win because she's better everywhere in my opinion, and better everywhere significantly. I mean, the striking, I think it's night and day. I think Lemos, a ton of volume, a ton of power. The reach, Ruiz just looks kind of lost on the feet. Whenever I watch tape on her, it's not great at all. And then, the ground game, Lemos, I believe, is a BJJ black belt, a very legit grappler, lots of submissions on her record as well. And she just has more ways to win. I think she can, get a dominant decision, or I think she can get a knockout. I think she can even get a sub. She was able to submit Miranda Granger, who's a decent submission artist herself. And I just like Lemos here in every single aspect of the fight. So if I was to do a parlay, which I don't know if I'm going to or not, but she's a parlay piece that I am comfortable with. Thus far, we've talked about, I think, like 5 or 6 fights. I think this is the one where, I wouldn't mind throwing Lemos in a parlay. And you mentioned it. I think inside the distance is going to be a very good look. She's a finisher, 89% finish rate, only 1 win by decision. Ruiz has never been finished, but there is a first for everything. I think Lemos has a very good chance of finishing this fight, whether it is a knockout, whether it is a submission. I think she can do whatever she wants. I think she's much better. I don't get this matchup at all. I really don't. I think they brought in Ruiz to lose to Cheyenne Bays. I think they wanted to build Bays up, and I think it didn't work out. And I think they're punishing her by giving her to Amanda Lemos. This matchup makes no sense to me. So taking a look at the fight doesn't go to decision. It is minus 105, which typically you don't usually see those kind of numbers in women's fights. I think the Aldana Yana Kunitskaya fight was like plus 260. Fight doesn't go to decision, like plus 280 around there. But yeah, I think this fight finishes. I think it's Lemos doing the finishing. I'll be maybe parlaying Lemos if I can find another parlay piece that I like, or Lemos inside the distance. It's going to be maybe plus money. And at that point, I will take a shot there. Any preference on, I'm assuming you like the under here as well?
Love that under. Yeah. Lemos she just hits so hard. And I would encourage anybody, who's thinking about betting on this fight, just go back and watch that performance against Sosa. My God, it was so impressive. Amanda Lemos is so good. And I got this one down as my ass shaving of the night. I think this is going to be the most one-sided fight on the card here.
Yeah, I really don't see any way at all how Ruiz wins this fight, like at all. I mean, is she going to take down Lemos? I don't think that's going to work out. Is she going to strike with Lemos? I don't think it's going to work out. I mean, every single aspect of MMA, I just think Lemos has her covered, and not only covered, but covered by a really significant margin. So although it's probably not smart to lay minus 500 on women's MMA, I think Lemos is legit. So getting into the next fight here, we have Daniel Rodriguez going against Preston Parsons. D-Rod was supposed, I forget who was supposed to fight, but his opponent pulled out, and stepping in on short notice is going to be Preston Parsons. D-Rod, 34 years old, 6'1", 74-inch reach, going against Parsons, 25 years old, 5'11". Not sure on his reach there. We'll take a look at the last couple fights. So, of course, Parsons is making his UFC debut here and going against D-Rod, who had that nice win against Mike Perry, had that loss, put in quotes, loss in a fight that he won against Nicholas Dalby. The judges did not see it that way. Knocked out Dwight Grant, and it was one of the most exciting 2-minute fights you'll ever see. And he did beat Gabe Green by decision, and then submitted Tim Means. So honestly, like, I'm really impressed with Daniel Rodriguez and what he's done thus far in the UFC. I personally think he should be 5-0 in the UFC. I thought the Dalby fight, I still to this day don't know how they scored it for Dalby, but I'm really impressed with D-Rod. I think he's well-rounded. I think he's a phenomenal striker. He's a legit BJJ black belt as well. And, going against Parsons, so I've not done much tape on Parsons yet, but I do see that, he's a submission artist. I think all of his wins come by submission. I don't think Parsons has been to decision yet as well. I don't know if I'm right about that or not, but I still need to do more tape in the Parsons side. But this is a fight where, maybe D-Rod could be a parlay piece, or maybe like the under could be a good look, because I do not see this going to the distance. So, Uncle Weezy, what do you got for the stats on this one?
Yeah, you just said it right there. I think you just let the cat out of the bag where the bet is. Preston Parsons, 11 pro fights, all 9 wins by submission, all 2 losses by finish, 1 by knockout, 1 by submission. And then if you look at Rodriguez, you're talking about a 79% finish rate in his wins, and he's never been finished in his losses. So the problem with Parsons is, now I have not watched any tape on Parsons. I don't know anything about this guy. I can just tell you what I know about Rodriguez. And Rodriguez has 6 UFC fights, and he's basically won all of them. The judges awarded one of them to Nicholas Dalby for some reason. I don't think Dalby won a round in that fight. I don't know how the hell Rodriguez didn't win that fight. So let's look at it through this lens. Daniel Rodriguez, 6-0 in the UFC. And he's not beating bums. I mean, Mike Perry, Nick Dalby, Dwight Grant, Gabe Green, Tim Means. This guy's come in fighting really good opponents. And we do know that Preston Parsons' path to victory has been submission 100% of the time, but you're talking about a legit 10th planet black belt here in Daniel Rodriguez, literally studying under Eddie Bravo. So, if the path to victory is submission, boy, that's going to be hard. And in order to submit somebody, you got to take them down first, unless, of course, you're fucking Zhuma Gulov, right? So, let's look at Daniel Rodriguez. 6 fights in the UFC. He's had 14 takedowns attempted against him. His opponents have only gotten 3 of them. He's successfully defended 11 of 14 takedown attempts. That's almost 80% takedown defense, and 0.63 takedowns allowed per 15 minutes. Another interesting stat for Rodriguez is the amount of time that his fights have taken place in control time. We're talking less than 10%. About 9.5% of Rodriguez's fights have taken place in some kind of control time position, which means that 91% of his fights have taken place in the center of the octagon, where Daniel Rodriguez is going to... Now, I don't know how good of a boxer Preston Parsons is, but when I see 9 wins and 9 wins by submission, that tells me that he prefers to win fights by submission, because that's where he's good. So he's probably going to get pieced up on the feet by Rodriguez. This one, has all the hallmarks of another ass shaving. And, frankly, I've seen, the hallmarks of ass shavings on so many of these, the Nascimento fight, the Lemos fight, now Rodriguez versus Parsons. You got to remember, this Parsons guy's coming in on, 9 days' notice. It's a tall order to fight any UFC veteran. But now you're talking about a guy who's 5-1 officially, but should be 6-0. and is winning decisively over guys like, Tim Means. He subbed him. He knocked out Dwight Grant. Yeah, this is a really tough spot for Preston Parsons here, a really tough ask. I hope he gets another fight after this, because it wouldn't be fair to ask this young man to come in and fight a killer like Rodriguez on 9 days' notice, especially since this guy's path to victory is a submission, and then you put him up against a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. Boy, this is a tough road to hoe for Mr. Parsons, man. Do you see this any differently?
No, it seems like probably the worst possible matchup you can give Parsons here, right? Like D-Rod, legit BJJ black belt, great takedown defense, and I like the guy a lot. I like his skill set. He's so tough. He has never been finished, never been knocked out, never been submitted, which in this fight, that's a really good look. So 16 fights, only 2 decision losses, tons of volume from D-Rod as well. I do think I'll have the striking advantage from what I've seen from Parsons so far. Of course, I got to dig into the Parsons tape a little bit more, but yeah, if D-Rod, fights smart, keeps on the feet, like even if he wants to take it down to the mat, which, that's giving Parsons a path to victory there, but, just keep it on the feet, piece this guy up and maybe knock him out. Yeah, I like D-Rod here. First look, I do got to dig into the tape a little bit more, but just looking at it from the numbers, looking at it at like a first look standpoint, it seems like such a great matchup for Daniel Rodriguez. And we have one book that opened the fight up already. We have Daniel Rodriguez minus 165 or minus 265. He opened up minus 225. So money's already coming in on that. I don't have access to that line myself. Preston Parsons plus 205. The fight doesn't go to decision. My goodness, minus 290. Minus 290 they open up. So they're thinking there's going to be a finish. We're thinking there's going to be a finish. Yeah, minus 290. That's wide. That's wide. But I do think this fight finishes one way or another. And I really do like D-Rod. So he might be a potential parlay piece for me. But again, I got to dig into Parsons a little bit more. But from what I'm seeing, it just seems like an awful, awful matchup for Preston Parsons here.
Yeah, and that inside the distance prop is probably going to be the way to bet this. I mean, Rodriguez solid, almost 80% finish rate overall. I like seeing that 50% knockout finish, so 7 of his 14 wins are by knockout. And then you put on top of that Parsons is taking the fight on short notice, and that 100% of Parsons' losses have come inside the distance. So if you don't want to lay like almost minus 300 on D-Rod here, you could probably get that down to almost plus money for the inside the distance prop, and that might be the way to play this. Or you could just play the fight doesn't go to decision, just in case this fight goes to the ground and this guy Parsons, who has 9 submission victories, maybe he locks something up. I have to still watch tape on this guy. Obviously, this was a last minute replacement. So, but yeah, I like Rodriguez inside the distance, and I think that fight doesn't go to decision. Also, there are so many parlay pieces on this card. We got to kind of whittle it down and figure out the best parlay pieces, because there's a lot of them that are kind of sticking out here, man.
Yeah, it's one of those cards where there's a ton of big favorites. I'm probably going to end up with a parlay because how can you not? I mean, there's so many great parlay pieces. You just got to put the right ones together. I typically like to keep my parlays to 2 legs because two leggers are hard to hit enough, and I do like those 2 leggers myself. D-Rod may or may not be in that 2-legger there. I think it's a good matchup for him thus far. What is up, Billy, in the chat? Thanks for hanging out. D-Rod, Islam Parlay, Hammer, and what's up, Weezy and Brady? Best show on the pub here. Appreciate that, Billy. Appreciate that a bunch. He likes the D-Rod Islam Parlay, which probably comes out to close to like minus 170, minus 180. Don't hate it. Don't hate it. D-Rod has never been finished. I think that's key. He never been submitted, never been knocked out. The guy's tough as nails, man. Tough as nails. BJJ black belt, well-rounded. So well-rounded. I like this guy. I like this guy. How old is he? 34 years old. He's getting up there. But I like this guy quite a bit. Fake defraud. No, he's good. Come on, he's good. Isn't this a weight class up for Dan? I'm not 100% sure. You know if it is or not, Weezy?
No, I don't think it is. I think Dan's always fought at 170, hasn't he?
His last fight was at 170, yeah.
Yeah, because he's been fighting Tim Means and those guys. So yeah, this one's definitely at 170, and I think every other fight for Rodriguez has been at 170, yes.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So, yeah, I like D-Rod there. All right. So we'll get to the next fight here. We have should be a fun one. I mean, Billy Quarantillo fights are always pretty entertaining. Billy Quarantillo going against Gabriel Benitez. Quarantillo is 32 years old, 5'10", 70-inch reach going against Benitez, 33 years old, 5'8", 71-inch reach. We'll take a look at the last couple fights. Benitez did win a decision over Jason Knight. He won by knockout against Humberto Bandené, lost by knockout against Sadiq Youssef, and lost by decision against Omar Morales, and then it knocked out Justin James in his last fight. As far as Billy Quarantillo, he did knock out Camilla Kirk on the Contender Series in a fight where Kirk was looking really good in that first round. Kirk ultimately gassed out, and Billy finished him. He submitted Jacob Kilburn in one of the biggest ass beatings you'll ever see. He took Spike Carlo to a decision, very close decision. He ended up getting it done there. He knocked out Kyle Nelson, and then he just lost a decision against Gavin Tucker. So very good fight here. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this one. Should be a very good one.
Man, this is probably my favorite fight on the card, you know, next to Makhachev Moises, and Stevens Gamrot's going to be a damn good one too here. But God, what a great matchup this is. These are two really good fighters, winning UFC records. You know, what's surprising here is that Benitez is 33, but Quarantillo is 32. You just look at these two guys and you would expect Benitez to be much older, but both of these guys are at very similar points in their career. Benitez has been doing it 5 years longer. 18 pro fights for Quarantillo, 30 for Benitez, 22-8 record for Benitez, 15-3 for Quarantillo. So about 45 more minutes of total cage time for Benitez. The average fight time for these guys, both below 10 minutes. And then we see, you know, career length. Quarantillo, 8 years, almost 14 for Benitez. And then we look at the UFC experience, twice as many fights for Benitez. He's 6-4, while Quarantillo's got 5 UFC fights, and he's 4-1, one of those being like Contender Series fights. I always include the Contender Series fights in my stats. Average fight time, almost 12 minutes for Quarantillo, about 8.9 for Benitez. If we look at how these guys finish fights, a 77% overall finish rate for Quarantillo. He's kind of an equal opportunity finisher, just as likely to finish by knockout as he is by submission almost. And the same thing for Benitez. Benitez is a kickboxer, but what's surprising about that is that he's actually gotten more wins by submission than knockout, as 45% of his pro wins have come by submission and 36% have come by knockout. If we're looking at how these guys lose fights, Quarantillo and his 3 losses, 1 of them has been by knockout, 2 of them have been by decision. And for Benitez, we got 1 loss by submission, 1 loss by knockout, and 2 of them by decision. So these guys don't really get finished any particular way. They don't lose any particular way. What Quarantillo's best weapon is his volume, his conditioning, his pace. When he combines those 3 things, the volume, the conditioning, and the pace, he's fucking terrifying. That, you know, like when Quarantillo wins fights, he breaks dudes. That's the difference between somebody like Benitez and Quarantillo, is that Benitez can hit you with 1 big shot and kind of put you away. With Quarantillo, it's just going to be the forward pressure, the crazy volume that he puts on people, the crazy pace. He was losing that first round of Cam Weller-Kirk on the Contender Series. And then in the second round, man, like he just flipped the switch. And then all of a sudden he was throwing like 13, 14. He's the kind of guy who throws more strikes per minute in the second and the third rounds than he does in the first, you know, which is, you know, you don't see too many of those type of fighters in the UFC. There's only a couple of them, like guys like Covington, guys like Jonathan Pierce, and then Quarantillo was definitely one of them too. Even Gregor Gillespie, just the volume of his wrestling that, you know, he can put on people here. And let's look at Quarantillo's striking numbers. This is where we see that pace that I'm talking about. He's landing 7.03 significant strikes per minute. He's offering 10.9, 65% striking accuracy. Now, we saw earlier a guy like Anderson Dos Santos, who's throwing 9.3 strikes a minute, which is high volume, but only landing at a 28.57% clip. This guy's landing, you know, he's throwing 11 strikes and landing at almost a 2/3 clip. That's fucking crazy. 0.24% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed, 0.26 knockdowns per 15 minutes. Not crazy power, but eventually you do get knocked down if you're absorbing 150 significant strikes over a 15-minute period, you know, and he's averaging 7 significant strikes per minute and only absorbing 4.37. He throws 11 significant strikes per minute, and his opponents are only throwing about 7.5. So he's out voluming his opponents. He's outlanding his opponents. He's more accurate than his opponents. And then if we look at Benitez, we see some really impressive numbers as well, because he's actually throwing more volume than Quarantillo, but he lands at a much lower rate. 4.38 landed, 11.36 offered. So his striking, accuracy is 38%, while Quarantillo's is 64%. Benitez showing more power, though, and he's probably getting about twice as many knockdowns per 15 minutes. So a little more power, a little less accurate for Benitez. What's really impressive about Benitez is the striking defense. 70.5% striking defense over 10 UFC fights. So that's a great sample size. His opponents are throwing 11 significant strikes per minute and only landing 3.26. Benitez has been knocked down on 0.7% of the total significant strikes landed against him. So he's getting knocked down about a third of a time per 15 minutes. So as accurate as Quarantillo is, he's probably going to have a hard time finding the target, because Benitez, even though Quarantillo is 64% accurate, Benitez is 70% accurate in terms of defending strikes. So, Quarantillo will probably have a little bit harder time being accurate in this fight than he has in the past, because Benitez is so good defensively. Now, if we look at Quarantillo offensive, 5 out of 16 takedowns, 31% takedown percentage, 1.28 takedowns per 15 minutes, 1.79 submission attempts per 15 minutes, and 35% control time. So he's controlling his opponents almost twice as much as they're controlling him. So Billy's getting takedowns at a 31% clip. He's attempting takedowns at over 3 takedown attempts per fight. So he is showing a little bit of a ground game and a control game. His takedown defense is only 57%, so not good. He's getting taken down 3.06 times per 15 minutes. Now, ordinarily, we would be worried about a statistic like that, because we don't like seeing that kind of takedown defense. But if we look at Gabriel Benitez's grappling numbers, only 2 takedown attempts in 10 fights, only 1 takedown in 10 fights. So Billy Quarantillo's biggest defensive hole here is probably not going to be exploited by Gabriel Benitez. Gabriel Benitez does not have good takedown defense in his own right either. He is pretty good on the ground, though. Like we said, 45% sub rate and 36% knockout rate. So even though people think of Benitez as a really good kickboxer, he is very good defensively with his grappling, and he can, he's only lost 2 of his losses have only come by submission. So just because you get him down, it doesn't mean you're going to easily control him. But Gabriel Benitez, about 4% control time, but 20% control time against. So he's yielding 3.03 takedowns per 15 minutes, while Quarantillo's yielding 3.06. But as I just mentioned, the guy that's going to be more likely to go to the wrestling at 3.33 takedown attempts per fight is Quarantillo, as opposed to the 0.2 takedown attempts per fight of Benitez. If we look at the level of competition that these guys are fighting, we will see that Benitez has fought and beaten the better brand of competition here. He's fought the higher level of competition: James Morales, Sadiq Youssef, Jason Knight, Humberto Bandone. While you see Quarantillo, wins over Kyle Nelson and Spike Carlisle and Jacob Kilborn, and Kamwella Kirk, a loss to Gavin Tucker. I'd give Benitez the experience advantage. I would actually give Benitez a little bit of the striking advantage, but I think that the pace of Quarantillo will take over after the first round, and you'll really see Quarantillo put it on Benitez. We saw Benitez having some trouble making weight last time. His fight actually got called off because he was going to fight another volume monster in Jonathan Pierce. And it looked like he purposely missed weight by about 3.5 pounds, so he'd be harder to take down. We got to watch Benitez on the scales, because he's been having some problems here, making 145. So let me make sure that this fight is going to be taking place. It is taking place at 145, so we're going to have to look at how Benitez looks on the scales here. That's going to be a factor, because he missed weight last time. I'm leaning Quarantillo here. I think his pace and his pressure and his volume will help him win the second and third round, and I think he can also mix in his wrestling. But Benitez is far more experienced. He's fought the far tougher competition. I think this is one of the most intriguing fights of the night, and I'd really like to get into the tape a little bit more before I make an actual prediction, but I can't wait for this fight, man. I'm leaning Quarantillo here, but there's a lot more to go into. So why don't you take it home for us here and let us know which way you're leaning?
Yeah, such a good fight. I love Billy Quarantillo fights. They're always so exciting. And you mentioned it. He always gets better as the fight goes on. Yeah, we take a look at the line here, and it's very interesting because I do see a lot of love for the Billy Quarantillo side. And Billy Quarantillo is a pretty big dog. Benitez opened up as a plus 115 underdog, which probably a fake line there. Currently minus 210. And Billy Quarantillo is plus 180. Also have Benitez at minus 200. I kind of expect the line to come down a little bit. But I'm kind of going the other way. I really, really do like Benitez in this matchup. The thing about Billy Q is, yes, he puts on a lot of pressure, a lot of pace, but he's so hittable. 42% striking defense, and you really don't want to be hittable against a guy like Gabriel Benitez. And maybe you can get away with it against a guy like Spike Carlisle, a guy like Jacob Kilburn, Camilla Kirk, but I don't know if you can get away with it against a guy like Gabriel Benitez who can hit very, very hard. He's a finisher. Some of the best leg kicks you ever see. The guy kicks very, very hard. And I don't know, it could be a close competitive fight. I think Billy's going to be landing probably the more volume, but I think Benitez is going to be landing the harder shots for sure. Another interesting aspect of this fight is going to be the takedown defense of Benitez, because you take a look at it, on paper, it looks like it's horrible, 56%, but most of that is going to be because of Enrique Barzola, who's a very good wrestler in his own right. Took him down 9 times, but I went back and watched that fight, and Benitez did so good at getting back up. When he got on his back, he was very, very active. He threw up submissions right away. Hit some of the best scrambles you ever see out of Benitez, and I believe he's a black belt in BJJ. Tons of submissions on his record as well. I think personally, it's a really bad matchup for Billy Quarantillo. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me. A lot of people like Billy, including me, but I'm really high on Benitez in this spot. Yeah, the weight miss is definitely concerning. That was just 2 months ago. I got to see him on the scales, but I'm going to sit back and wait and see where this line goes. Because, yeah, I do expect a lot of people to be on the Billy side, but Benitez, 83% finish rate, so definitely a finisher, 48% by submission. Billy, a finisher himself, 75% finish rate. I think, yeah, the pressure of Billy does scare me a little bit. I think early on, I think Benitez is going to be looking phenomenal. I think he's really going to piece up Billy Quarantillo. I think he's really going to chop at the legs, and we'll see what happens from there. But, Benitez shows some good cardio, but if he is having problems on the scales, maybe he does look bad and slow down as the fight goes on. And typically, that's how you do see Billy Quarantillo win these fights, where he does get better as the fight goes on. So for me, personally, I do like Gabriel Benitez, and it might even be a potential bet depending on where the line's at. But I'm going to sit back and wait. But I do like Benitez quite a bit this week. And as far as the fight doesn't go to decision, kind of tricky because both guys are good finishers, but both guys are very tough as well. But Quarantillo has some chin on him. The guy has a really good chance. I don't know if Benitez knocks him out, but I think he can hurt him. The fight doesn't go as plus 140. I wouldn't really mess around with like the over-under. Any preference on the over-under for you personally?
Yeah, not really. Like I say, I'm waiting to see Benitez on the scales here, because if he looks like he had a bad weight cut, that kind of pace that Quarantillo is going to put on him is just going to be something that he's not going to be able to handle. But if he comes in looking good, and you mentioned it, these takedown defense numbers are a little bit misleading. I mean, if you watch Benitez in his most recent performances, guys are trying to take him down. James was trying to take him down. Yusuf was. Knight was. He gets right back up, and he attacks submissions from his back as well. So the numbers look worse than they are. But if I see Benitez coming in heavy, looking bad on weigh-in day, not only will I probably get to a Quarantillo moneyline bet, but I'll be betting the under, or the fight doesn't go to decision is what I would bet, actually, because I could really see a late finish because of that pace and that volume that Quarantillo puts on people.
I like that because, yeah, if he has a bad weight cut, it looks like crap on the scales. If he does slow down as the fight goes on, we mentioned it, Billy has some of the best pace and pressure and volume you'll see in the UFC. So, yeah, I don't hate that. So I think it's one of the fights where you probably want to sit back, see where that line goes, and wait for those weigh-ins. I think the weigh-ins going to be very important, something to definitely mention. I didn't even think about that getting to this fight, Weezy, so thank you for bringing that up. The weigh-ins, very, very important for that one. All right, my goodness. PTSD for me here. Rodolfo Viera going against Dustin Stolzfus. Man, Viera, I still have nightmares about this guy, man. I mean, he went out there against Anthony Hernandez. He was looking good. He was looking so good. I thought instant submission. And no, the guy gassed out. And I went back and watched that fight. Almost puked, by the way. But the announcers were like, man, I've never seen somebody gas out this bad in my life. The announcer said this was the most gassed out they've ever seen anybody be. And the guy's gas tank's horrible. I mean, he's bricked up. He's very strong. So strong. Great takedowns, great wrestling, top of the notch BJJ. But it's just that cardio that is, some of the worst, if not the worst cardio in the UFC and Rodolfo Viera. So kind of gives me pause looking at the line. I mean, Viera's a pretty big favorite in this spot. But he is 31 years old, 6 foot, 73-inch reach, going against Stolzfus, who is 29 years old, 6 foot, 75-inch reach. Comes down to the last fights. So Viera did beat Oscar Pajota by submission, beat Saperbag Safarov by submission, and of course lost to Anthony Fluffy Hernandez by submission. I think Fluffy by submission was like plus 2,500, something crazy. And he submitted Viera. My jaw dropped, and my jaw stayed dropped for the rest of the card, for the rest of the night, for the next couple days. Just did not see that coming. It was crazy. But he did gas out, and that's a huge concern here, especially considering he's a huge favorite. Going against Dustin Stolzfus, who did make his UFC debut against Kyle Dawkins, lost that fight by decision, and then did knock out Joseph Pfeiffer. I believe that was on the Contender Series. So as far as Stolzfus, I'm not impressed with the guy at all. I don't think he's good. But, I mean, Viera, I think he's very talented, but he's very talented for about a round. So, interesting matchup. I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on this one, Weezy.
Yeah, you mentioned the conditioning of Viera, which is a huge hole. But, there's one even bigger hole in Viera's game, and that's that his striking is god-awful. It might be the worst striking in any division, men's or women's, in the UFC. So now we got a guy who is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu god, right? And he has gotten fantastic wins using his Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. But we know that this is not the age of the specialists anymore. We saw Ryan Hall get knocked out pretty bad after going for 14 consecutive leg locks unsuccessfully. Rodolfo Viera has no striking whatsoever, and he has about 6 minutes of gas on a good day. If he doesn't get this fight done in the first round, he will lose before the bell because he doesn't have the kind of body that can go at a rate for more than 5 minutes. He just doesn't. I remember watching that fight. I was on vacation that weekend up in my girlfriend's country house, and we were sitting around watching. I'm like, you got to watch this guy Viera. He's amazing. He looks like an action figure, and I got a ton of money on him, and he's going to take this guy down and just submit him immediately. And then, you're watching somebody, you're watching a fight like that with somebody who knows nothing about mixed martial arts, and your jaw is getting lower and lower as you see him gas out. And my girlfriend looked at me. She's like, man, he looks really tired. What's wrong? I go, I don't know, and then it just got worse from there. And how much did you bet on him? Why did you think he was going to win? It's like, oh, God. And you look like a dumbass, because you thought, and that was because when you have an undefeated fighter, and nobody's ever seen the guy lose, sometimes you don't know what the holes are. And it turns out that this guy doesn't have just one hole in his game. He's got 2 gaping holes. He might have the worst conditioning in the division, and he might have the worst striking in the division. So what's his path to victory? Well, it's getting a takedown early and then submitting you before that first, before 5 minutes is up. And if we look at Viera's takedowns, 9 out of 19 in 3 fights. So that's fantastic. He's averaging 6 takedown attempts per fight, and his average fight time in the UFC has only been 6.43 minutes. So he's actually averaging 7 takedowns per 15 minutes. But we've talked about this ad nauseum, Brady. When you're the one doing the offensive wrestling, it drains that gas tank. And he is attempting so many takedowns because he literally has no striking, so he has no choice but to go out there and just spam takedowns. Because the longer it's Dustin Stolzfus will look like Muhammad Ali if this fight stays standing for 3 minutes. I'm telling you, he's going to knock him out because Viera is awful. I'm done with this fucking guy. After losing that fight against Fluffy Hernandez, after exposing those gaping holes in his game, why are you going to bet on somebody who could get knocked down? He could get knocked out by a female flyweight. He's got no striking. And then if he doesn't get the submission, and Stolzfus is a credentialed grappler. So even, and another thing about Stolzfus is that we know that this guy's not a dumbass. He's a very intelligent guy. I think he's got like an engineering degree or something to go along with. He doesn't need to be doing this fighting shit. He's smart enough to not have to get into a cage against a guy like Rodolfo Viera, but he's doing it anyway. And I think that if he's smart, and I think Stolzfus is smart, his corner will just tell him, all you got to do is survive 5 minutes. Once 5 minutes is up, this guy's done. And I am going to be leaning Stolzfus here because you can't have two huge holes in your game at this level, having both of them be exploited. He was really put on Front Street with that last performance, with his striking and with his conditioning. You can't have those two holes in your game at this level and think that you're going to go far. This guy's ruined for me. I don't even know how much longer we're going to see Viera in the UFC, because if he can't submit somebody in the first round, dude, he's not going to win. And I got a feeling you feel the same way, because we were both, this guy made a prick out of both of us the last time he fought.
Yeah, I mean, it still upsets me till this day. I mean, he looked good early, but the cardio is just so bad. And you see it in a lot of fights. He does slow down. Even in that Pahota fight, he did slow down. I think he still was able to get a submission in the second round, believe it or not. But yeah, he was gassed out in that fight. And the Fluffy Hernandez fight was just such a bad look. And, Stolzfus, I don't think he's good at all, really. But somebody said in the chat, all he has to do is survive for 5 minutes, and he wins the fight. Viera, he needs a first round submission. I guess some important things to note is Stolzfus, like you mentioned, is not sure what the belt rank is, but he is a solid grappler when he does get taken down, which he can be taken down easily. So I do expect Viera to have some early success. He's very active off his back. He's throwing up submissions, great scrambles. So yeah, I mean, survive 5 minutes with Viera, make him work on the mat, don't get subbed, and you can easily win the fight. So for me, this is a big, giant pass. I mean, you take a look at the line, it just makes no sense to me. Makes no sense how a guy that, for him to win, he needs to get this done in the first round by submission against a guy that, has never been subbed, a good grappler himself. Minus 250 for Rodolfo Viera, and money's coming in on him. He opened up at minus 210, currently minus 250. And I get all that. Stolzfus, he's not great. He's not a great striker, but when you're gassed out, like you mentioned, Stolzfus is going to look really good if he does gas out here. But yeah, Rodolfo Viera very well could win in the first round. It's just he needs to win in the first round to get the win. So I'm kind of leaning with the dog here. I'm not going to bet it necessarily, but I might be looking at some violence here. So I'm assuming they'll set the over-under at 1.5. I think the under could be a solid look here, because if Viera wins, it's going to be in like the first couple minutes. And if Stolzfus wins, I think he can get a finish himself early. I don't see this fight going the distance. Even like the fight doesn't go as like a parlay piece, minus 265. I really don't hate that. Like, I'd be shocked if this fight did see the scorecard. So yeah, I like Stolzfus as a dog pick. Will I put money on him more often than not? Probably not. But I will be probably looking at this from like a violent standpoint, as in, if Viera wins, it's inside the distance. If Stolzfus wins, it's probably later in the fight. So like the minus 265 fight doesn't go could be a possible parlay piece for me. Remember, we're in the small cage as well. So I do think there's going to be a lot of grappling. And if Viera has not fixed his gas tank, which I'm imagining he has not, because the guy is 31 years old and his gas tank in general is just so bad. Looks like he cuts a ton of weight as well. So do you have any preference on the over or under? I'm assuming you do like the under as well with me.
Yeah, I'm with you there on the under. I think that's like probably the safest bet. Even if you're on Viera, just bet the fight doesn't go to decision, because Viera's line is already wide. But, if he does gas out, if he isn't able to finish Stolzfus, you got it covered, really, because Stolzfus, even though he's not, Stolzfus isn't what you would call a credentialed finisher, but, once you're gassed, it doesn't take much to finish anybody, Viera went looking for the door. He let that. Anybody who's ever been choked out by an arm triangle could tell that Rodolfo Viera, he wanted that door. He put his own arm in front of his face like he was tapping, and he just locked up that choke, man. Hernandez has finished it so fast. He was done. So you got to love the under here. It covers both sides. It covers both potential outcomes. I think it's the safest bet for this particular fight. But I'm going to be looking at that Stolzfus money line, because in my opinion, you can't have two huge holes in your game like Viera does. Conditioning and striking. Man, that's like 80% of the sport. So, no, I'm on Stolzfus here probably.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I can kind of see why the line's this wide because Stolzfus, he doesn't really have great takedown defense. But then again, like his grappling is not terrible. I know Rodolfo Viera is the black belt hunter. That's his nickname, which hopefully he changes that soon. You can't get submitted by Fluffy Hernandez and have that nickname. But yeah, I like Stolzfus here. Don't know if I'll get there on the money line, but I'm looking violence. If you do like Viera, probably just play him by first round submission. I think that's how he wins, maybe first round in general. But I'm assuming that price won't be that great. But yeah, interesting fight. Screw Rodolfo Viera after what he did. I hate that guy. I hate him so much. So we'll get to the next fight here. Jeremy Stephens going against Mateusz Gamrot. Stephens, 35 years old, 5'9", 71-inch reach. Gamrot, 30 years old, 5'10", 70-inch reach. Take a look at the last couple of fights. So Gamrot did make his UFC debut, lost a split decision against Guram Kutaladze. I did personally score that fight for Gamrot. I know a lot of people thought that Kutaladze won, but I personally scored it for Gamrot. Very close fight. But if you look at the numbers, I know Kutaladze hurt him in that fight, but it was Gamrot all day according to the numbers. But again, he was hurt at some point in that fight, which could have swayed the judges for sure. And he did knock out Scott Holtzman. Very good performance there. Prior to that, couple wins, 4-1 in his last 5 fights. He only has 1 loss on his record. So getting to Jeremy Stephens, the guy has not won in a very long time. 0-4 and 1 no contest in his last 5 fights. The guy has not won in so long. KO loss to Jose Aldo, a decision loss to Zabit, a no contest with the Yair. I think it was like an eye poke, and then a decision loss against the Yair, and then a knockout loss against Calvin Kattar. So, Jeremy Stephens, he's getting up there in age, 35 years old. He's taken a ton of damage throughout his career. Mateusz Gamrot, somebody it's definitely in his prime, had a really good performance against Scott Holtzman. Still need to dig into the tape on this one, but first look, Gamrot could be a potential parlay piece for me. I guess the one thing that scares me away is going to be the power of Jeremy Stephens, what we're going to talk about for sure. But I think Gamrot's very well-rounded, good ground game, good striking as well. And again, Stephens has not won in so long. Could he turn it around here? I don't know, but at first look, I do like this fight for Gamrot. So curious to see some of the stats on this one.
Yeah, we got this. This is a great one. This is where your Uncle Weezy really can shine when you got a big sample size like this, when you got a whole bunch of past experience to go on. I can really dig into the stats and find some interesting stuff for you here. So yeah, Jeremy Stephens. Okay, first thing I want to bring up about this fight. This fight is taking place at 155. Jeremy Stephens missed weight in his last fight at 145, weighed in at 150 and a half, and got clocked by Calvin Kattar and finished in the second round. So now Stephens, for the first time in many years, I can actually go back to the advanced stats here and kind of look at it because he hasn't fought at 155 in a long time. It's been since the Yves Edwards fight in 2012 since Jeremy Stephens has fought at lightweight. After that, he fought 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 18 fights consecutively at the featherweight division. Now we got a 35-year-old guy. Yeah, 35-year-old guy moving up to lightweight. Big red flag right there. That is a big red flag. 0-4 and 1 no contest is another huge red flag there. And then you bring in a guy like Gamrot, who is 18-1-1, and he could easily be 19 wins and 1 no contest here. You got a guy who in his own right is very experienced, 20 fights, 231 minutes of cage time, a 9.5-year mixed martial arts career. While you look at Jeremy Stephens, man, 47 fights, 453 minutes of cage time. So there's a lot of tread on those tires. In addition to that, he's 5 years older than Gamrot, 27 more fights than Gamrot, 220 more minutes in the cage, 7 more years as a professional mixed martial artist. So Jeremy Stephens has 33 UFC fights. He's 15-17 with 1 no contest, while Gamrot's 1-1. If we look at Stephens, he is a knockout artist. 68% of his professional wins coming by knockout, only 7% by sub. For Gamrot, he's more of a decision guy, as only 33% of his wins have been by knockout and only 22% by sub. So that means 45% of this guy's wins have been by decision. Gamrot has never been finished, and Jeremy Stephens, in his 18 professional losses, has been finished 6 times. 3 times by submission, 3 times by knockout. Let's go to the striking numbers. We got Jeremy Stephens landing 3.18 out of 7.77 for a 41% striking accuracy. We got Gamrot landing 4.26 out of 8.85 for a 48% striking accuracy. Both of these guys are landing knockdowns and over 1% of their significant strikes landed. Very impressive at this division. And both of these guys are landing exactly 0.7 knockdowns per 15 minutes. Now, I dug a little bit deeper into the stats here. Jeremy Stephens in his UFC career has 18 career knockdowns, 18 of them. And that's in 33 fights. So he's gotten a knockdown in 12 different fights, and he's had multiple knockdowns in a couple of them. When Jeremy Stephens gets a knockdown, he's 10-2 in the UFC. When Jeremy Stephens doesn't get a knockdown, he's 5-15 in the UFC. So right there, we can see that power number that's jumping off the screen for us at Jeremy Stephens is basically, that's the variable that we need to figure out here. Is Gamrot gonna absorb one of those big strikes from Jeremy Stephens? Jeremy Stephens, who was knocking people down at 145, not really at 155. So is that power going to translate up here at 155 against the younger man? We don't know that. Jeremy Stephens has gotten 30 of the 78 takedowns that he's attempted. For 38.46% takedown percentage, he's getting 1.16 per 15 minutes, while Gamrot has gotten 7 out of the 21 that he has attempted. So look at that, 10.5 takedown attempts per fight for Gamrot. This guy is definitely shooting a lot of takedowns. He's getting them at a 33% clip, and he's averaging 4.91 takedowns per 15 minutes. And if you watch Gamrot's tape prior to the UFC, this is how he wins fights. He's a wrestle boxer. He really mixes in his wrestling with his striking very well. And pretty much everybody that he's fought has had a really difficult time dealing with it. One thing that I do want to point out here, though, is that Gamrot has been knocked down. Even though he's got a 65% striking defense, he's only absorbed 47 strikes in the UFC, but he's been knocked down once. So there is a path there for Stephens. If that power is going to come up with him to 155, he's got a chance to knock down Gamrot because it has been done before. Kuta Veladze knocked him down. So Gamrot, probably 11.5 takedown attempts per fight, while for Stephens, it's about 2.5 takedown attempts per fight. So Gamrot's going to be much more likely to go to the wrestling and mix in his wrestling than Stephens. And believe me, he'd be smart to. Because even if you just watch the last fight with Calvin Kattar that Stephens had, this guy, he still swings with everything he has. He puts everything he has in every punch. He's coming to knock you out. He's coming to throw power, and he doesn't box. He just throws haymakers. So Stephens, it could catch him, and that's what scares me here. If we look at Stephens, he's had, in his 33 fights, he's had 111 takedowns attempted against him. 73 of them have been defended successfully for a 65.77% takedown defense. That's pretty good. He's getting taken down 1.47 times per 15 minutes. He's getting controlled about 2% of the time more than he's controlling his opponents. While for Gamrot controls his opponents 20% of the time and only has been controlled less than 1/10 of the time. So, it looks like Gamrot's going to have the wrestling and grappling advantage here. Stephens is definitely going to have the power advantage. But Gamrot's shown a little bit better striking defense, but he just can't get knocked down. In terms of Jeremy Stephens' strength of schedule, we got a 1.52 ratio. His average opponent is 9-6, while Gamrot's a 1.75 ratio. His average opponent is 3.5-2. So Stephens obviously has fought the better brand of competition over his UFC career. For Christ's sake, guy's got 33 fights. He's fought probably a dozen champions and former champions at this point. He's been in the UFC for so long at this point. He's kind of fought everybody at 145 and 155. So Stephens got the experience advantage. He's got the power advantage. But Gamrot is the one who mixes the martial arts a little bit better. He mixes in his wrestling with his boxing. Much higher winning percentage against not a highest level competition. I'm going to be leaning Gamrot here. Jeremy Stephens at 35 years of age with all that tread on the tires, it's either knockout or bust for him. Which way are you going on this one?
Yeah, 35 years old. He's turning 36 at, what is that, December? So like 35 and a half years old and coming up a weight class this late in their career. I don't like it. I don't like it. The guys that won a lot, and Gamrot's legit. I think Gamrot is legit. 30 years old in his prime. Good everywhere. Great striker. Like you said, he can mix in the wrestling, solid grappling as well. I think he has more path to victory to win, whereas Jeremy Stephens, his path to victory would be getting a knockout. That's kind of what I'm a little bit hesitant about, maybe like throwing Gamrot in a parlay, is because of how dangerous Stephens is. But somebody mentioned in the chat, like going up a weight class, is that power going to translate? Gamrot's never been knocked out. I think it's a really good spot for Gamrot here, but again, it's the power that's kind of holding me back for like going all in on Gamrot in this spot, because you can't count on Jeremy Stephens. He's so dangerous, but I do think he is definitely getting towards the end of his career here. So taking a look at the odds here, we have Gamrot, who opened up minus 170. Would have loved that line. My goodness. Now minus 225. On some books, minus 230. I see minus 200. Okay. Don't have that book. Bet MGM, minus 200. I really like that. As far as the fight doesn't go to decision, minus 165. Kind of an interesting one because, again, Gamrot's never been finished, and Stephens has not been finished too often. Stephens has only been finished, 6 times, or 5 times, but in 18 losses. Very tough guy to knock out. Yeah, I like Gamrot. Potential parlay piece for me. If I can get that minus 200, I'd place that right now. So do you have any preference on like the over under, or like a straight bet on Gamrot, or maybe put him in a parlay? What are you looking at for it?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind parlaying Gamrot. I could even see betting him straight. As far as the total, I don't have a strong lean either way there. I probably would stay away from that total, but yeah, I like Gamrot. He's younger. He's probably a lot more well-rounded at this point. And when you're facing somebody like Stephens, and you have, and a fighter like Gamrot has that really high percentage wrestling to go to, he's not going to fucking sit there and box with Stephens. That'd be dumb. This guy's trying to win. He's trying to move up the ladder. He knows how to beat Stephens. Stephens got good takedown defense, but man, Gamrot's getting crazy amounts of takedowns, and he's getting them at a very high percentage too. So, yeah, I like Gamrot here. I don't want to overthink it. I think I would just parlay him or bet the money line straight.
Yeah, I like him as well. Yeah, definitely a parlay piece I'm looking at. In a card full of parlay pieces, I think Gamrot is one of the more ones that I feel comfortable with there. So now we will get to the next fight, and let's see. Is it? It is. My goodness, what the heck is this fight? And it's the co-main event as well. I'm going to go ahead and pull up the 1-800 Gambler for this one, but my goodness, man, I can't believe this. Miesha Tate making a return off of a huge layoff. I want to say it's like a 5 or 6 year layoff. It's been forever since we've seen Miesha Tate going against a 70-year-old in Marion Reneau. She's literally 44 years old, and she just turned 44, I believe. If I'm not mistaken, I think she's the oldest or second oldest fighter on the UFC roster. So you have somebody that has not fought in a good 5 years going against a 44-year-old Marion Reneau who's going to retire after this fight. Yeah, 1-800 Gambler 100%. And I see a lot of people already betting on this fight. It's a tough fight to call. But yeah, Marion Reneau, like I said, 44 years old, going to be 10 years older. 5'6", 68-inch reach, going against Miesha Tate, who is 34 years old, 5'6", and a 66-inch reach. So Reneau is going to have a 2-inch reach advantage. Last couple fights, Marion Reneau has not won in a long time. Lost a decision against Macy Chazon, lost a decision against Raquel Pennington, decision against Yana Kinskaya, a decision against Kat Zingano, and a submission win over Sarah McMahon. So not only is she 44, not only is she, towards the end of her career, not only is she, not looking great in her last couple of fights, she is 1-4 in her last 5 fights on a big losing streak. And then we got Miesha Tate, who again has not fought in I think 5 years. Lost a decision against Raquel Pennington, lost by submission against Amanda Nunes, submitted Holly Holm, and beat Jessica Ai and Sarah McMahon by decision. So yeah, curious to hear your take on this. Kind of a weird fight to break down because there's so many unknowns, and it's just a weird fight in general.
Yeah, very weird. The first stat that I want to bring up is that Miesha Tate's last fight against Raquel Pennington took place November 12th, 2016. Okay, so that 1-800-GAMBLER is up on the screen because Brady and we care about you. Okay, how the hell are you supposed to bet on a fighter that you haven't seen them all of 2017, 18, 19, and 20, half of 21? You're talking about a 4.5-year layoff here for Miesha Tate. And you'd say, oh, let's fade that 4.5-year layoff. Let's take her opponent. Well, her opponent is 0-4 in her last 4 fights and is almost as old as I am, which isn't good in mixed martial arts. 44 years old. Both of these ladies have been around the block a time or 2 or 3. 11-year career for Marion, 13.5-year career for Miesha, 25 pro fights for Miesha, 17 pro fights for Marion. Marion Reneau is a finisher, though. When she wins, she finishes 89% of the time. So 8 of her 9 wins have come by finish. 3 of them by submission and 5 of them by knockout. And Marion Reneau, in her 7 losses, has never been finished. While for Miesha Tate, she's got a 56% finish rate, and she's been finished 82% of the time. So Marion Reneau finishes 89% of the time, and Miesha Tate gets finished 82% of the time. And Miesha Tate finishes 56% of the time, and Marion Reneau gets finished never. So unless you think Marion Reneau is finishing Miesha Tate, the way to go on this one might just be the over. But these ladies are so old that one of them might break a hip in the first round, and then it just might, so who the hell knows, man? I don't even know why we're talking about this. I could read all these numbers, but what good is it going to do any of us? All right, let's talk grappling. Let's just talk grappling here. We're going to go past the striking numbers on this one because I just don't think that's going to look good at either way. Marion Reneau, 12 fights, 11 takedown attempts. She's gotten 7 of them. That's pretty damn good. 63.64% takedown percentage. She controls her opponents 12% of the time, gets controlled 26% of the time. Marion Reneau, pretty awful takedown defense at 50%. She's only successfully defended 20 out of 40 takedown attempts. So she's getting taken down almost twice per 15 minutes. And we know that Tate's a wrestler, so 10 out of 44 takedown attempts for Tate, though, only 22.73%. So for somebody who's a wrestler, you'd like to see, a higher percentage of takedowns, but less than 25%. That's not good. And then Tate's takedown defense is pretty bad as well, 55% takedown defense. She gets taken down 2 times for 15 minutes and gets 1 submission attempt against her. 40% or almost 40% of Reneau's fights have taken place in control time position, while for Tate, it's been about 60. So chances are this will be a grappling match. Who's going to win? I don't know, and I don't care. Who's fought the better competition here? Miesha Tate has. Miesha Tate has definitely lost to the better competition. Marion Reneau is losing to like a 500 fighter at 4 and 3.67, while the fighter that Tate is beating or is getting beaten by is 6.75 and 3. So I wouldn't touch this. I mean, I would lean Tate just because Reneau's 44 years old, 0-4 in her last 4, hasn't shown much recently. But you can't really count on somebody who, even though Miesha Tate's only 34, she's been on a 5.5-year layoff. So, or 4.5-year layoff. I can't bet this. I can't do anything with this fight. There's just too many unknowns. There's not enough talent here in terms of just, having a path to victory. Yeah, man, I'm just staying away.
Yeah, I think staying away is definitely the way to go. And we see that Miesha Tate opened up as a plus 115 dog, actually, and she's now minus 125. So people are actually taking a shot on Tate here, and I can see why, because I think they're banking on, and she comes back and she looks like she did, say 5 years ago. I think they're banking on that. But fact of the matter is, that's probably not how it goes. I mean, that is a long layoff, man. Like that is longer than you'll ever see. So that kind of concerns me. But with that said, if she does come back and she looks, somewhat like she did 5-6 years ago, I think this is a very, very winnable fight for her. It's just the cage rust, the long layoff. What has she been doing in that layoff? Didn't she have a baby as well? So yeah, I mean, red flag after red flag after red flag. 1-800-GAMBLER if I've ever seen the fight. For me, I'll go Tate because of the poor takedown defense of Reneau. Reneau can't be controlled. Tate does or did have solid wrestling. Tate did have very solid grappling. So I'm kind of banking on somewhat of the old Miesha Tate showing up. But if she shows up and looks like crap, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised. So this fight has pass written all over it. I'm not looking at a money line bet, especially as a favorite at Tate. I would never do that with a 5-year layoff. And even if like the fight doesn't go and fight goes, I have no intent of betting this fight either way, any way possible, any props, nothing. I will have zero exposure to this fight. What a shit show, Uncle Weezy.
Complete shit show. It's not our fault. There's nothing we can do about it. You know, I would have never let that fight anywhere near a main card. But, you know, Miesha Tate and Marion Reneau have done a lot for women's mixed martial arts. You know, Reneau has announced that this is her retirement fight, so they're giving her a co-main event spot. She's a pioneer in a new sport, and Miesha Tate's one of the pioneers as well. So good on both of them for getting a high-profile fight here. I just don't care that much about it. And as a gambler, it's so hard to find an angle or find something that you feel safe betting when one woman is 45 and the other one is coming off a 4.5-year layoff. So let's get to this main event, man. Makhachev, Moises, are you kidding me? These are two really tough guys. I can't wait. I can't wait.
Oh, yeah. I'm definitely looking forward to this main event. Before we get into it, I do want to remind you guys that me and Uncle Weezy will be doing a video on my channel, DFS by the Numbers, breaking down the main event, going balls deep into it. Always a great time looking like really, really deep into it. We usually take like 30 to 40 minutes to break it down. So go check that out. It'll be out on Monday. Me and Uncle Weezy will be recording that as well. We do have, I think, like 83 likes right now. If we can get 17 more by the show's end, that'd be awesome. Trying to get to 100 likes by the time we get out of here. And also, if you're watching in the future, please hit the like as well. Let's get those likes if you guys are killing it. So we will get into the main event here, and it's a really good fight. I think some people are probably sleeping on this fight, but I know I'm excited for it. I know Uncle Weezy is excited for it as well. Two guys that have a lot of talent. We have Makhachev, who is 29 years old, 5'10", 70-inch reach, going against Thiago Moises, 26 years old, 5'9", 70-inch reach as well. Take a look at the last couple fights between the two. So Makhachev did knock out Gleison Tibau. He got a submission win over Johnson, a decision win over Sarukian, or submit win over Johnson, a decision win over Sarukian, a decision win over Ramos, and a submission win over Dober. And then as far as Moises, he did take Hernandez's decision, beat him there. He did win a decision over Bobby Green, which very controversial. I thought Bobby Green got it done. He did submit Michael Johnson, a very hilarious fight where he got outstruck like 26-1 in that first round. He went for, I think it was like an ankle lock in the second round and submitted him in there. And then he lost a decision to Damir Ismagulov and then had a decision win over Kurt Holloway. So both guys doing pretty good in the last couple of fights, 4-1 in his last 5 fights in Moises, and then 5-0 in his last 5 fights against for Makhachev. So Uncle Weezy, curious to hear your thoughts on this fight.
Yeah, this is great, man. This is, you know, one of the things that I first want to bring up, Makhachev only 29, and he's got 9 UFC fights, and Thiago Moises only 26. You know, these guys are both really good young mixed martial artists with fantastic skill sets. And if we look at the pro experience numbers, very similar. 20 fights for Makhachev, 19 for Moises, 19-1 record for Islam Makhachev, 95% winning percentage. While for Moises, 15-4. Moises' fights go a little bit longer, so he's got about 50 more minutes in the cage. And Makhachev been doing this almost 2 years longer than Moises. 8-1 in the UFC is Islam Makhachev, 86 minutes of cage time, and average fight time just under 10 minutes. While for Moises, it's a very impressive 5-2 with 84 minutes of cage time, 12.11 minutes average fight time. So how do these guys win? Thiago Moises, 15 wins, 40% by sub, 20% by knockout. So that means 40% by decision. While for Makhachev, he's got about a 60% finish rate overall. So 40% of his wins are going to decision too. So very similar there. These guys only have 5 combined losses. Makhachev's only loss came by knockout to Adriano Martins. And Thiago Moises has never been finished. So this is going to be a 5-round fight. You know, this is something we haven't seen out of either of these guys thus far in the UFC. having to go the full 5. So we're going to have to keep an eye on conditioning. That's going to be a big part of this fight. Also, we have to keep in mind that wrestling is very exhausting. And if you're going for takedowns unsuccessfully, that could really cause a problem in a 5-round fight. Striking stats. Islam Makhachev only landing 2 significant strikes per minute out of 3.54 offered. So super low volume. But his opponents are landing 2.8, or I'm sorry, Thiago Moises is landing 2.85 out of 7.54. So way more volume for Moises, 4 more significant strikes offered per minute than Makhachev. Moises much less accurate at a 38% striking percentage, while for Makhachev it's 56.54, but that's probably because he lands a lot of ground strikes. Both of these guys showing some power. Makhachev landing a knockdown on over 1% of his significant strikes landed. So he's got 2 knockdowns in his 173 significant strikes landed. While for Moises, it's just under 1%. So he also has 2 knockdowns in the 242 strikes that he's landed. Both of these guys are averaging exactly 0.35 knockdowns per 15 minutes. What's really impressive here is that while Islam Makhachev is only landing 2 significant strikes a minute, that's a low number. What's even lower is what his opponents are landing against him, 0.77. So that's how dominant Makhachev has been. He's not even absorbing 1 significant strike per minute. He's showing a 70.35% striking defense. So he is very hard to hit. He has been knocked down on 1.5% of the significant strikes that he's absorbed. But, one thing I want to bring up is that this guy has been in 9 fights, Islam Makhachev, and his opponents in those 9 fights have only landed 67 significant strikes against him. That means when this guy fights, if you were to score 10 significant strikes against him in 1 fight, you'd be above average. You'd actually be way above average. So this guy Makhachev has been very dominant, even with his striking numbers. We haven't even started talking about the grappling yet. Thiago Moises is actually absorbing a lot more significant strikes than he's landing. Thiago landing 2.85, absorbing 3.88. He's showing a 60% striking defense, which is very solid. He's getting knocked down on 0.3% of the significant strikes landed against him. Definitely not chinny. Only 1 knockdown against and 329 significant strikes landed. So Islam Makhachev, the number that jumps off the page when we get to the grappling stats for Islam, 20 of 29 he is on takedown attempts. That's almost 66%. No, that's over 66%. It's 69%. So when this guy goes for takedowns, he gets them. And not only that, he's amassed 52.63% control time with those takedowns that he's gotten. So even though he's only averaging just over 2 takedowns per fight, he's amassed over 44 minutes of control time in the 86 minutes that he's been in the cage. So once again, the kind of dominance that jumps off the page here. Moises has gotten 33% of his takedown attempts, 6 of 18. So he's averaging about 2.5 takedown attempts per fight, and he's getting just under 1 takedown attempt per fight. He's averaging 1.06 takedowns per 15 minutes, and he's getting about 12% control time, yielding 23% control time. So we see a path to victory there for Makhachev, as Makhachev is controlling his opponents 52% of the time, only being controlled 8% of the time. So Makhachev's a control monster. While Moises, who's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt and a world champion at that, so he's also got a very good ground game, but we can see in the stats here that even though he's got a great ground game, he is getting out-controlled by his opponents, almost twice as much time as he's controlling them. And Moises' takedown defense is 63.64%. Not horrible, but that's not going to get the job done against Islam. When Islam's takedown percentage is higher than his opponent's takedown defensive percentage. You almost never see that. That's a crazy stat. To see 50% takedown accuracy is fantastic, right? But when you see almost 70% takedown accuracy, and this guy's attempted 29 takedowns, man, that's crazy. So yeah, you see why Makhachev is a huge favorite here. He's so hard to hit. He dominates control time positions. He's very accurate with his takedowns. And when he does get takedowns, He's extremely heavy on top, has great submission defense. If we look at the strength of schedule, we see a 1.76 ratio for Makhachev, 1.54 for Moises. Both of these guys fighting experienced fighters. The average opponent for Makhachev has a 6.44 and 3.67 record. The average opponent for Moises has a 5.71 and 3.71 record. So both of these guys are fighting good competition. Makhachev probably just a little bit better according to my metric. Makhachev's wins are better. He's got a 1.83 ratio on his wins. The average record of the guy that he's beating, about 7 and 3.75, while the average record of the guy that Moises is beating is about a 500 fighter with a 4.6 wins and 4.4 losses and a 1.05 ratio. Give me a second. All right, there we go. The losses. Makhachev's only loss in the UFC came to Adriano Martins, who was 4-3. So it's a 1-1 ratio there. While Moises, the average opponent that's beating Moises, has a record of 8.5-2. So it's kind of like what Makhachev is at 9-1. That's the kind of fighter that Moises is losing to, somebody of that caliber. And then if we look at the names, Drew Dober, Davey Ramos, Sarukian, and then before that, Cajun Johnson and Old Gleison Tebow. And then you see the names from Moises, not quite as impressive, but Alexander Hernandez is a solid win. Bobby Green's certainly a solid win. That win against Johnson was really nice, even though he was getting waxed in the first round. Ismagulov, I believe, is 5-0 in the UFC, so that's an understandable loss. Kurt Hollabaugh. So, excuse me. Yeah, I'm definitely leaning Makhachev here, but the line is so wide, I'm not sure how much value there is in it because, first of all, this is a 5-round fight. We don't know how Makhachev is going to act in a 5-round fight if he doesn't get Moises out of there early. Second of all, Makhachev's path to victory most often is using his wrestling and top control game. But in this case against Moises, with the exception of Davey Ramos, and that fight really didn't even go to the ground at all, Moises will be the best grappler that Makhachev has faced, besides Ramos, is what I'm saying. And Moises and Ramos are on a very similar Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu level. They're both world champions. So if Moises can keep this fight standing, that's when it really gets interesting. That's when Makhachev isn't going to look like he's minus 550 because Thiago Moises just won a striking battle with Alexander Hernandez, and he looked really good on the feet there. And and Moises is only 26 years old, so he's the kind of guy who's still making improvements at this point in his career. Now, Makhachev's takedown accuracy is so impressive, and Moises' takedown defense hasn't been at the level that leads me to think that Moises is going to flat out win this fight, or that there's reason to believe that this fight's going to be standing long enough for Moises to be able to win some rounds. But if Makhachev chooses not to go to the takedowns early and often, this fight could wind up a whole lot closer than the people who are holding minus 550 tickets on Islam would like it to be. I understand why Islam's a big favorite. I think he's an amazing mixed martial artist. The hype is real, but remember, he has lost, and his striking was really bad in that loss against Martins. It was 5 years ago, but he threw a big overhand left. Makhachev is a southpaw. It was slow. It missed by a while, and missed by a mile, and his head got about 1.5 feet over his knees, and Martins just landed a right hand and put him out. He almost broke his leg falling down because he got his lights put out. So Makhachev's striking isn't where it needs to be, in my opinion, for him to be minus 600 against Thiago Moises. That being said, I still think Makhachev probably wins this fight 3 out of 4 times, 4 out of 5 times. So I don't think I'm going to get to a money line bet on Makhachev, but I don't think I'm going to bet Moises either.
Yeah, I don't think I'll have a bet in this fight, to be honest. Maybe I'll take a look at the props or two. But yeah, I like Makhachev to win as well. But yeah, the line is getting kind of crazy. Minus 700 you see for Islam Makhachev. And the fight doesn't go to decision is minus 105. Brought up a lot of interesting points. And, Moises, the guy's very interesting. Like, he's making rapid improvements, fight after fight. Like every time that you see this guy fight, like he looks better and better than the fight before. Training at a very good camp and American top team as well. And just seeing massive, leaps and improvements from the Moises side. His striking's getting a lot better. I mean, his striking looked really good against Alexander Hernandez. I mean, nobody was expecting Alexander Hernandez to lose a striking match against Thiago Moises. Nobody, even me. And I picked Moises in that fight, and that really surprised me there. But yeah, the striking, if Makhachev does not choose to go to the wrestling, like you said, it will be very, really close. But, the odds are he probably will go to the wrestling early and often. I do think he does get down Moises. Moises can 100% be taken down. It's just, like you mentioned, Moises is a legit BJJ black belt. Makhachev has been put in some very bad spots. Some that I can note would be the Nick Lentz fight. Lentz put him in a lot of bad spots, but he was able to fight out of those. Chris Wade put him in a ton of bad spots, even reversed Makhachev a couple times in that fight. But of course, these fights were like 3-4 years ago. You got to remember that as well. But outside of that, like he's able to fight out of these bad spots, which you do like to see. But like you said, this is going to be arguably the best grappler he's faced outside of the Damihamach fight. So I think it's going to be a very interesting fight. I think Makhachev, for him to win, takedowns, top control. I think, Moises can be controlled, but he's dangerous. He's dangerous. I went back and watched that Moises fight against Beneil Dariush, and nobody ever pulls guillotine on Beneil Dariush. He pulled Gilly 3 times in that fight. I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Why would you pull Gilly on Beneil Dariush? But he has that much confidence in his ground game that he would pull Gilly on Beneil Dariush. I was like, what? But yeah, I mean, I like Makhachev. I think he gets it done. The line is just a little bit too wide because, like you said, the striking very close. In the grappling, you got to favor Moises in terms of the grappling, but the wrestling and the top control of Makhachev, it should be enough to get the job done. But yeah, minus 700 seems a little bit wide to me. As far as like the fight doesn't go and fight goes to decision, I'm kind of leaning towards the fight doesn't go based off the fact that, I think if Moises is going to win, I think it needs to be a finish. I'd be really shocked if Moises won any type of decision. I think it'd have to be a sub. And Makhachev, maybe it is like a late finish. I have seen Moises slow down as the fight goes on, especially if somebody is pushing a really heavy pace on him like Beneil Dariush did. Moises slowed down a ton in that fight. But Makhachev has never been 5 rounds. Makhachev's never seen the 4th round, whereas Moises has been 5 rounds. I went back and watched his 5-round fight earlier today. It was like 50-45 on all 3 judges' scorecards, something like that. But yeah, Moises at least has seen the later round, so that's good for him. But yeah, I'm going Makhachev. Don't know if I'll parlay him. I think there's some better parlay pieces on the card, in my opinion, at least for a better price, like minus 700. I just don't think I'll get there. So what'd you say? You said you're going to probably pass on this fight as well, or are you looking at a play here?
Yeah, I maybe might get to an underdog play on Moises, just saying something to the effect of, all right, well, he's only got to win this fight 1 out of 5 times for me to break even. But, I'm not jazzed about betting Moises. Just, minus 650, minus 700. It gets a little bit crazy. I wanted to take us back 2 fights here to the Stevens Gamrot fight. I missed something on my notes that I thought that was important too. Jeremy Stevens has been taken down in 15 fights in the UFC. When he gets taken down, he's 4-11. And Gamrot's going to take him down. So that was another stat that I wanted to bring up that I forgot. But as far as the Makhachev-Moises fight goes, fight doesn't go to decision should be interesting because both of these guys are good. And if one of them does gas out in the 4th and the 5th round, somebody will get finished. Makhachev could submit Moises. Moises could knock out Makhachev. And really any of those 4 things could happen. Moises could submit Makhachev and Makhachev could knock out Moises. So there's a lot of different ways that this fight could go. Makhachev wins it most of the time, I think. But, Thiago Moises is getting better. He's young. His striking is improving. I think if he can keep this fight on the feet for a little while, he can make it interesting. So, but yeah, I can't really get to a bet on this one right now. It's something I'm staying away from, but we got to dig a little bit deeper. We'll go even balls deeper into this one on your channel. And then maybe once we do that, we can find a way to play this that's going to feel safe and we feel like we'll have a good chance to make money on it.
Yep, sounds good to me, man. I'm looking forward to this card. I think a lot of people are probably going to shit on this card a little bit. Maybe not a lot of great betting opportunities, at least from like a straight betting standpoint. We have a ton of huge favorites, a ton of potential parlay pieces. I probably will have a parlay. Kind of the parlay pieces that stuck out for me was going to be the Amanda Lemos parlay piece. What was the other one? Gamrot parlay piece potentially. I think those were my top two. Even like what's his face, Nascimento as a potential parlay piece, Daniel Rodriguez, those are just some of the parlay pieces that stick out to me. So I'll definitely have a parlay. Just got to figure out which one I do like the best. But yeah, it's a good card. I think it's gonna be really good. Check out me and Uncle Weezy's main event deep dive. It's gonna be on the channel, my channel, DFS by the Numbers, tomorrow. It should be out there really early in the morning. As always, thank you guys for hanging out. I had a bunch of people in the chat. We're going to be going live, doing this every single Sunday. We'll keep doing it as long as you guys do like it. So hopefully you guys do like this content. We like doing it. It's really good to get into the stats. So yeah, that's about all I got. You can follow me on Twitter, DFS_numbers, Instagram, DFS by the Numbers. Follow me there, and my DMs are always open if you want to chat fights. I'll kick it over Uncle Weezy. Uncle Weezy, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter at MMA Weezy, and they can find me on YouTube at Uncle Weezy. I do balls deep breakdowns and do at least 3 or 4 fights every week that aren't the main event, because I always do the main event balls deep breakdown on DFS by the Numbers channel. You can find me every Sunday night right here on Pub Sports Radio with my man DFS by the Numbers doing stat diggers. And then come by my channel on YouTube. I'm always breaking down fights in detail, usually 20 to 25 minutes per fight. And I'm planning some new content on the channel to come up soon. I'm still kind of trying to figure out what I want that to look like. But thank you for all of you guys for spending your Sunday night with us. I love all you guys who hang out with us and talk fights. It's not the same without having you guys here. So thank you all for hanging out. Thanks, Pub Sports Radio, for having Brady and I. And I'm going to keep showing up and doing this every single week as long as you guys have us.
Sounds good. Yeah. Again, always a fun time for sure. Thank you all for hanging out. If you guys can leave a like on your way out, that would be much, much appreciated. Let's get those likes up. But yeah, again, appreciate you all for hanging out tonight. Good luck for UFC Vegas 31. And let's make some money next week. See you guys later, and